Right. I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. There's other things you could be doing tonight. Yes, I'm sitting in this planning commission meeting. Like sitting watching the presidential debate, which I know we're all riveted by. Or maybe be outside.
Okay, that sounds nice.
I think I'd rather. So tonight we have four quasi judicial cases in front of us. There are some people in the room who could do this better than I will do it. They've done it a few times and there's some people it's the first time. So I'm going to give kind of an outline so it doesn't seem so intimidating. I remember sitting in the seat some of you are tonight and kind of going, what the heck is going on? So I'll just kind of outline it and then we can go through it together as we get into your cases. You're sitting in front of a board appointed by the City Council of Cannon Beach. When we bring up your case, we're going to make sure no one has a conflict of interest. I'll ask anyone if they think that has a conflict of interest. I will ask our planners for their findings. We talk about what's before us and their view on what is complete and what's missing and what questions we might ask. And then I'll ask the applicant, which is the person who's asking for this variance in several cases, to come forward as the applicant. That's your opportunity to make your best case in front of us. We have a lot of written record, different cases, but your verbal also counts too. We will ask, after the applicant has made their presentation, we'll ask for any proponents of that application to come forward. We'll then ask opponents to come up if there are any. And then the last step there is we'll ask the applicant if they would like to respond to any testimony provided by a opponent. That then will be after the applicant is given the last chance to speak, we'll close the record. Once the record is closed, we won't open it again. So it's important to get in everything you think you can. And that's why we offer the applicant the last opportunity to speak. So they can make sure that they have responded to anything out there that might not have been responded to earlier. Once the record is closed, we then will debate the case in front of us. We will talk through different pieces that we're concerned about, and we'll make a ruling. It's a quasi judicial group. We're somewhat judge and jury here. I don't like to think of myself as a judge, but I guess we are. Inevitably, people come out sometimes elated and sometimes unhappy with our decision. This is a due process. If you don't agree with our decision tonight, you have the right to appeal that. The council, that right of appeal is 2 weeks from the date of the signed order. So not necessarily tonight, although it could be tonight, when I sign the order that we come up with. If that order is not something you agree with, you have 2 weeks to take that to City Council and say, hey, I think they missed it here. Let's talk about this. You guys, is there anything I missed in terms of this process, looking at it for the first time? I think I got it. All right, let's do this. I have a motion to approve our agenda for this evening.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Okay. Let's call the roll, please.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Move to the minutes from our last meeting, May 23rd. Are there any amendments to the minutes? With no amendments, may I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes?
Seconded.
Any discussion? Okay, Tess, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. At this point in our meeting, we've added a section this year where we allow the public to comment on things that are not necessarily before us tonight, but they believe to be in our purview, the Planning Commission's purview. If you do have something that you believe falls in the Planning Commission's purview and you'd like us to consider it, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And again, please try to keep them within the purview of something that the Planning Commission could take action on. Is there anyone who'd like to speak or has something to bring forward to the planning commission? No hands up online? Okay, we'll move on. Our first item tonight is a quasi judicial hearing. It's an extension request for SR 2301. Jeff and Miriam Taylor requesting an extension of their approved setback reduction. Jeff and Miriam Taylor are requesting a time extension to obtain a building permit for a previously approved setback reduction application, which permitted a setback reduction to reduce the backyard setback from the required 15 feet to 8 feet 6 inches in order to build a small porch of 72 square feet to be used as an emergency access. The property is located at 1956 South Hemlock, tax lot 4300, map 510, 30 DD, and in a residential medium R2 zone. The request will be reviewed against the municipal sections 6.040, time limit for approved setback reductions, and section 17.65.010 setback reduction provisions established. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the planning commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or a personal bias? Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit? We've asked that question before, but I know I've made a site visit and site visit.
No. Since this application's been in.
Oh, doesn't that count if we've been by before?
That's maybe.
I think that counts.
Didn't know my side visit.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a year ago.
I think, oh,
Yeah.
you drive by there all the time.
Yeah.
All right, maybe we have the staff report.
All right, good evening. One of the things I'd like to just point out initially is just on the title of the staff report, it indicates there's an error where it says 15 feet to 5 feet. The notice in the rest of the staff report and in the agenda says that that's 15 feet to 8 feet 6 inches, which is the correct version. So that's an error, the 5 feet. So they're just asking to maintain what was previously approved. So basically what we're talking about is the plan commission had approved a setback reduction application for the purpose of constructing a ground level porch in conjunction with the replacement of a dwelling at 1956 South Hemlock Street. Planning Commission approved the setback reduction at their May 25th, 2023 meeting, and the orders were signed on June 9th. An approved setback reduction is good for 1 year. In this case, the setback reduction was to expire on June 9th of 2024. The applicant submitted a building permit application to the Community Development Department on May 30th, 2024. And in a June 5th, 2024 letter, the applicant was informed by the department that the building permit application or the setback reduction deadline was getting close and that staff wasn't going to have enough time to act on the building permit prior to that happening. Again, the section that you had mentioned previously, section 1764.040 talks about the time limit for approved setback reduction and basically indicates authorization of setback reduction shall be void after 1 year or lesser period of time as approval may specify unless a building permit has been issued. However, when requested, the planning commission at a public hearing conducted pursuant to chapter 17.88 may extend authorization for an additional period not to exceed 1 year. So based on that, the Community Development Department had submitted a letter to the applicant informing them of that expiration date. Subsequent to that, on June 6th, basically the next day after they received it, the applicant submitted on June 6th a letter to the Community Development Department requesting the extension. And they stated that due to the complexity of the existing geological conditions, additional slope stability analysis was requested and required and delayed the submittal of the permit application. The analysis has been completed and submitted to the City of Cannon Beach Public Works Department for review as of June 6th. I can say that that indeed was the case or is the case. The permit application submitted on May 30th was complete. It was our intention to have the 130-page slope stability analysis as requested included with the application. And we're awaiting its completion. Once it became apparent that the report would not be completed in time to be included with the permit application, they immediately submitted for the permit. However, it does not provide the community development staff with the adequate time to review that request. They're indicating we only ask for enough time to complete the community development and other departments' review for the submitted permit application. So basically, they had that June 9th deadline. They submitted on May 30th. There was a significant geological report that needs to be reviewed of that. They've submitted that. We indicated we wouldn't have the opportunity to review that prior to the June 9th deadline. So subsequent to that, they submitted the letter to staff to bring to the Plan Commission asking for additional time. So there's a couple of criteria that we talk about. 17.64 talks about general provisions, which is basically the provisions that the Plan Commission used to grant the setback reduction. And then 17.64040 is the time limit. And staff was just commenting that on June 6th, we had received the letter prior to that June 9th expiration date, and that staff did not have any objections to the request.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There been any additional correspondence since say 2 o'clock today?
No.
Nothing. Okay, we'll move to public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets on the meeting page of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the person testifying believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Jay Orlock.
Did I hear Jay Orlock? Is that right? Go ahead, Mr. Orlock. May we have your address, please?
PO Box 563, Cannon Beach, Oregon 97110, representing Jeff Taylor.
Thank you.
I apologize. I'm slightly vocally challenged this evening. If you do need me to repeat something, please let me know. As noted in the staff report, we had submitted our complete application for the Taylor project. Review of the geological information, the city's representative Don Rondema requested additional information in regards to shear zone depth modeling, localized stability, cross sections, which we have completed and are awaiting our final report to provide him with that information. This additional information also includes some tiebacks into the right of way, which will be required to be reviewed by City Council, which is scheduled for August 7th. Due to the complications and the sensitivity of the slope, as we all know, Hemlock S-curves are a sensitive area for the road and development. We have worked with Don Rondema to provide the additional stability analysis and solution. And again, as we have to go through, as it is in right of way, and we have to go through the City Council for approval, we have gained, again, Don Rondema's approval and Karen Labonte at Public Works approval. This will be presented on August 7th to the City Council. We are requesting at most 180-day extension to the setback reduction ruling approval. I am available for any additional questions, and I know Jeff Taylor is also available today. if you have any questions, please, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Are there any questions for Mr. Rolo?
Excuse me.
Jay, just one question, and maybe Mr. Taylor can answer to spare your voice. You sound horrible.
Thank
Yeah, don't mention it. You indicated, I thought Steve indicated that the report had been submitted. There is some additional information that is pending, is that correct?
Yes, Don Rondma, in review of the final the geological report that we applied and included with our application on June 6th, requested some additional information for slope stability, which we have compiled and worked with him to provide the information that he needed, and the solution, which, like I noted, included tiebacks into the right of way.
I had one more question for Jay. I'm not gonna be as kind and offer up to the Taylor States, but you said 180 days is all you would need for the extension?
Yes, we figure, you know, the original setback reduction expired June 9th, June, July, August, September, October, November, as we have to go in front of the city council on August 7th. We would just like to provide the time needed for the building planning to review the plans and documentation provided with a little bit of buffer just in case anything else comes up.
Okay. Steve, did you have a question?
Yeah, could I piggyback off of what Jay was saying? The application was submitted with the geological report. Don Rondema is working on behalf of the city. Karen Labonte, the Public Works Director, had some concerns and wanted Don Rondema, who oftentimes works on behalf of the city, especially along the Hemlock and some of the sewer and water in that area. And based on those concerns of what they were proposing, we wanted to get another opinion. And that's one of the reasons that's also driving the rest of the time extension is there wasn't initially talking about tiebacks and things like that. That's why it's going for it to council for an encroachment, and all of this stuff is taking time. So there's a little bit of information that needs to get submitted, that needs to be reviewed thoroughly in order to provide a recommendation to council at the time it would proposed as to whether or not it makes sense to use grant and encroachment for some of the things they're requesting. So I just wanted to let the plan commission know that they had submitted the original one, and then based on the feedback and reviewing it, there's been this back and forth. And at this point in time, this has been one of the things that's come of it is the potential for an encroachment to use the right of way. So there's still process and procedure that needs to take place, because if the council grants it, we continue to have conversations about where we're going. If, for example, they denied it, then the applicant's going to be looking at additional ways of potentially doing the work necessary on their own property.
Okay.
So this is related to the primary structure, not the porch that's encroaching into the right of.
That's correct. It's kind of like, and that brings up a great point, because right now the setback reduction that the plan commission approved was for that porch section. Should there be any differences in terms of other things that are encroaching as a result of this, there may need to be additional hearings before the plan commission before that could move forward. Meaning that, say, for example, they needed other aspects of the house other than the porch, whether it's foundation or different things like that, that could have an impact on the original approval.
For later discussion, I'd like to know what the processes are on this encroachments.
Yes.
Okay.
Are there other questions for Mr. Orloff? Okay. Are there any other presentations by the applicant?
No, not at this time, unless Mr. Taylor would like to add anything.
Okay.
No, we're good. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Are there any other presentations by proponents? I see a hand up. I can't read.
Say Mindy Garlington from City Council, Gladstone, Oregon.
I missed the last name. I'm sorry, last name is what?
Mindy Garlington.
Scarlington, would you like to speak on behalf as a proponent of?
Yes, and my apologies for, I'm on my city computer, but I am a
Okay.
homeowner down at Cannon Beach. My question is allowing something to be permanent in a setback, is this setting precedents for the rest of us who own property and have setbacks? Just a question, and that's all. I'm gonna chow out.
I can answer that. And then Bill, if you wanted to confirm me, each individual variance and setback reduction are its own individual use.
Could you hold on one second?
Yes.
So it's a broad question. It's a question we think about all the time. Is it related to this specific request? I understand it's spurred by this request, but do we have a broad conversation about a variance setback and a specific request? Bill?
Yeah, and so I want to answer on two levels. First is, you're not talking about the variance here, you're talking about an extension. So, I
Right.
would focus on the extension, not so much on the
Right.
variance.
That's kind of my big picture is where we have a specific issue in front of us. That's a broad.
But in terms of setting precedent, to some extent you are, some you aren't. It really depends on the application. You got to remember, every piece of real estate is unique. And, one house adjacent to Hemlock at the south end of town might be very different from a house at the north end of Hemlock. To the extent you interpret the code in some way to say, this is what this means, you kind of are setting precedent that, if you're going to interpret it differently, you're going to have to take some steps, and we get there if you want. But in terms of, the code still is the same, but this particular setback encroachment doesn't have, or setback reduction doesn't have an impact on the roads in one location. You may have a very different situation somewhere else. And so a decision can set precedent, but not always.
Right.
So.
Steve, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it was important. We have another setback reduction request tonight. And I've actually never been asked a broad kind of policy question in the middle of a specific. Sure. So it was a unique situation. Thank you for the question. I hope that answered it. Is there anyone else who would consider themselves a proponent of this application who would like to speak at this time? Okay, are there any opponents? No hands? Okay. Would the applicant like to say anything else? There's nothing to really retort.
No, we're fine at this time unless you have any additional questions.
Any additional questions on behalf of us? No? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So at this point, we'll close the public testimony section and move to our discussion. Who'd like to lead off?
I think I don't have a conceptual issue with extension, but in this particular instance, I wonder if it makes sense given how much still needs to be determined about the configuration of the property. So it sounds like there may be encroachment into the right of way. If it's coming back to us, is it better to just reconsider this all at one time rather than extend this one piece that may or may not become useful later? I don't know. I'm just raising that as, does it make sense here to extend given the outstanding questions?
Does it make sense to go ahead?
So I was just going to comment, it sounded like the encroachment, the application is going direct to city council rather than to us.
Right, but if then they later determine that there will be an encroachment into the right of way, it may come back to us for a setback reduction for those encroachments. So in that case, we're already re-examining
Yeah.
the project. If the project's gonna change, do we just re-examine all at once? I'm just asking that as a question.
I had some thoughts. First of all, on the face of it, I'm inclined to grant the extension. The requirement certainly is not really their direct fault. I mean, But I am a little troubled. I recall this one very significantly, and although I know that that we granted a setback reduction, to 8 feet, 6 inches, that actually isn't what we did. We granted an exception to the western wall of the existing stairway, and that was important to me. What we did was we didn't do anything that caused any kind of earthwork to occur closer to the road than the retaining wall already existed. And to me, that's totally different than any other case that I'm aware of anywhere along Hemlock. But that's what I was comfortable with, and it just happens to be 8 feet, 6 inches. If that wall had been a different place, it might be a different number. I'm not sure about the issue, Mickey, that you bring up. I process wise, I don't know what.
Right.
Steve, did you?
Yeah, I could speak to that a little bit. I think that right now there isn't anything indicating that it's foundation wall or things like that. It might just be a typical type of retaining wall type situation. So those are somewhat unknowns as part of the report that should there be much more work involved that relates to the home and to the wall, then it would be something that would potentially come back. But if it's just strictly like the wall and tiebacks, the setback reduction would be enough and the report would be so, and you had asked in terms of encroachment, kind of what is that? And typically we don't see people requesting to use city property for private purposes. So what the encroachment would do is an applicant can make a request of the city to utilize city of Cannon Beach right away, in this case Hemlock, to potentially do what are referred to as these tiebacks that would encroach or go into the city's right of way to help maintain the retaining wall. And in order to do something like that, it's not a staff decision. It's not like an applicant decision. It's this encroachment process that's made available that one can apply to the council to see if the council would consider granting it. So I think at this point in time, they're kind of two separate issues. It's possible as documentation comes in and that we look at it closer, that if it's more related to foundation and building, that's a whole different story. And then things like that may have to come back. But until we know exactly specifically what that is, the idea was to at least provide this time extension, because if it's not an issue, this allows them to get the encroachment, but there's still this time period that's out there that they need to go through a city process in order to find that answer out.
I guess I'm not opposed to granting the extension if it allows the city to continue to work the issue on the stability of that slope. I would take the question that Ms. Garlington offered on precedent and say we should set it at a minimum that you're comfortable with. And I don't know that 180 days is correct. So I'm okay granting, but I would like your ideas on that.
Yeah. I know Jay had mentioned something about 180 days. I don't know, length of time and everything. We do allow for the extension of the year. I'm not saying it needs to be a year, but there's a little bit of work yet that needs to, be done. And I guess from a staff perspective, I don't see a real issue with granting a year, which is what's allowed. But I guess I would defer to the applicant in terms of what they realistically need.
Well, is there anyone else who'd like to comment?
Oh, just to that, I see in the staff report that you don't object to a full 1 year extension at all. All he was talking about was 180 days, so he's not even technically asking for the maximum allowed by our city ordinance right now. He's asking for what sounds like what he thinks is the appropriate amount for him to complete.
Thank you, Eric.
Done.
Thanks.
It's a reminder to me, this conversation we're having is a reminder to me of one of the things that we've been on guard for. And that is, as time goes on, what we initially intended sometimes gets a little muddied as it gets more complicated. One of our protections is to have it come back to us. So Les's point, hey, this isn't just 8 feet 6. There's a process behind how we got to that number. Could be lost as we just keep, getting more and more complicated. I feel the same way Les does. In principle, why wouldn't it be good to approve this again? We told them once they could do it. It seems like they're acting in good faith to get it done in a way that's conscientious in a very sensitive area for the city. But if we lose something that was important to us in the process, that might have us in this position where we're like, we got to see it again because it gets lost. I don't have the answer in terms of how I feel about that, but I think it's an important point.
Wouldn't it come back to us though? I mean, if it weren't 8.6 and 8.5 inches?
But they might lose the wall.
Right, and then I think they'd have to come back to us.
They wouldn't,
No.
as long as they held 8.6. Go ahead, Steve.
And there's a lot of information that staff knows of the plan commission's decision when it goes to council and has a feel for when it comes back and understands the plan commission's position. I mean, we as a staff would be, I would think, more conservative based on these discussions of concerns that were part of the original discussion. And if things changed, I think we as a staff would say, hey, what we have here is different than what you originally submitted. And we think that if you're making these changes, that was valid for this one. But if you're going to come in with something completely different or significant enough changes, that would have to be applied for a new setback reduction before the plan commission. I know there's some concerns about staff administering things and of that nature, but it is on us to keep these concerns that you have to share them with the plan commission at the time they're considering the encroachment and to review the application accordingly. And if we think there's an issue here, it should be brought back.
I don't know that I would point directly at staff and say, hey, you guys aren't really paying attention or anything like that. I forgot about the wall. As soon as you said it, I'm like, that's right. You lose these details. I think it's just human nature in our processes. When I think about the orders I sign, it's like, well, that isn't exactly what we said, but it covers the content. So when I'm coming back to it a year later, it's like, oh yeah, what did we really mean there? So even having this discussion makes me feel better about just going, okay, we can do it. But it's a reminder of the imperfections in our process.
Sure.
And some of the important pieces that can be lost as these things drag out. So.
Is there any benefit to a condition that the extension is granted, assuming no change to the existing wall, which was, as Les says, one of our key determinations? Like we said, it's already there. Why not allow a reduction just to the point of that wall? But if that wall is changing, does that negate our comfort with that setback reduction? Because it's a material change to what we granted.
In terms of timing, does it matter to the body whether we say 6 months or a year? It seems like they're working hard, and if they're working hard, to me, it's like, well, give them more time than less. That way we can try to get it done. Does anybody feel differently than that?
No, and if I remember correctly, there's only one extension possible.
Yeah, let's say year anyway. May as well.
Continue on.
Solidly. Okay. That sounds like we almost have a motion. Feel good about that?
Can I ask one more
Sure.
question? There wouldn't be any issue as far as a condition like that to say, hey, that's the same application that we approved previously. And if there's changes to that.
Yeah, I mean, if there are changes to the approved application,
They'd need to come
it
back.
shouldn't be a problem.
Right. Right.
Someone want to make a motion?
Oh. That's a good one. You guys, I move that we accept the application extension for 1 year on the condition that if there are any changes to the foundation wall, the wall supporting the hillside, then the extension is revoked. I don't think you can do that. The extension expires.
Right. What would that mean?
So I don't think expires or extension, but just a condition that.
It
you know, no
returns.
Changes to the role.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. No changes to the wall. So shall I restate it? I move that we grant the extension for 1 year on the condition that there are no changes to the wall.
Do we have, is there any discussion?
Hesitating because no changes to the wall, you know, does that
Right.
mean,
Yeah, what does that mean?
or they drill a hole through to pull a tie back?
Right.
Construction maybe of the wall.
Or removal. I think our concern originally was it's already been disturbed. But we don't want to see further encroachment this side of the wall. That's why we stopped our setback reduction at the point that we did. It just reached the existing encroachment. But if that existing encroachment changes, I don't know whether our consideration stays the same. I
So-
think that was the question.
I think it should, the condition should be no additional encroachment due to changes to the wall. So if, say something, big rainstorm, something happens and they have to do a repair to the wall, does that count as a change to the wall? If we're saying change to the wall?
You know, it's always difficult to sort of create a condition on the fly. And I wonder if it might make sense to let staff consider it and bring an approval back to you that outlines the nature of the condition, given the discussion here. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but I guess I'm not. You know, it just sounds to me that. You know, if anything was to change with the wall,
Side of the original application.
right, that's kind of where I'm going and
So we may not need the condition.
that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm not trying to say don't, but I think if there's a significant enough change, we're gonna be concerned about that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was to change from, say, retaining to foundation and different things, that was never discussed at the original meeting. That's different. And that would be staff's take on this.
Are you okay with that? I think we should just go ahead with this. I mean, they are actually looking at the geological pretty closely, so. I mean, I don't think you're gonna issue a building permit if that bridge is gonna fall, the whole damn house is gonna fall, right?
And if council denies it, there's a lot of discussion and study of what's yet to take place. So it's not like this is just something that we're just discussing and hey, it's gonna be, there's a lot of work yet to be done and review. So I feel very comfortable in terms of, you know, if there was a significant enough change that we would be bringing it back to the plan commission. Actually, they wouldn't be meeting what they had submitted and a new application would need to be filed for the new proposal.
I think that's right.
It's a great example of each of these cases being just a little different. And one of the things I'm remembering now is that wall, we said it's already there.
Mhm.
So, you know, we're not doing anything that hasn't already been done. So I'm okay with just the 1 year.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, Aaron, good.
So I move that we extend approve the extension for 1 year.
We have a second.
Second?
Any further discussion? Tessa, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander.
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair.
Yes.
Mayor Newton.
Yes, extension request is approved. Anybody want a break or we should move to the next? Good.
Let's move on.
All right, moving on. The next item is also a quasi judicial hearing. Public hearing 2404, Josiah Stromstad requesting a variance Size from that request, applicant requesting a variance to setback requirements at 3747 West Chinook Avenue, tax lot 1702, map 51029 CB in a residential medium density RC zone. The request will be reviewed against the criteria of code 17.8 for variances. Anyone object to the jurisdiction of the planning commission? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias?
No,
Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit? Site visit?
Site visit.
Okay. May we have the staff report?
Yeah, thank you. We're taking a look at the request as mentioned, and so we're taking a look at a front yard variance in order to construct a new 280 square foot second story residential deck over the garage and driveway facing the street at their home at 3747 West Chinook. The existing single family dwelling and garage currently meet the minimum required front yard of 15 feet. There's some applicable criteria as far as setback reduction provisions and established. The lot is approximately 6,500 square feet. And with the the building coverage of 24% at this point in time, when you include the structures, decks, driveways, it goes 39%. So they're within the areas that they need to be as far as lot coverage. There's a couple other criteria in terms of setback reduction that they're meeting. So I'm going to go jump to 17.84040, which is the variances and the criteria for granting the variance. Typically, a variance to a requirement of this title with respect to lot area, dimensions, setback, yard, lot coverage, height structures, vision clearance, and other quantitative requirements may be granted only if on the basis of the application, investigation, and evidence submitted by the applicant, all four expressly written findings are made, and those deal with a strict or literal interpretation and enforcement of the specified requirement would result in a practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship, that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to the property involved or the intended use of the property, that granting the variance will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, and that granting of the variance would support policies contained within the comprehensive plan. And staff's comments with regards to those variance criteria is the proposed second story deck is 280 square feet, so it's 7 feet wide by 40 feet long by 12 feet tall, and will be the full width of the home's frontage. Per the survey, it appears the home located at 3747 West Chinook Avenue was constructed with front yard setbacks of 20.3 feet at the northwest corner of the home and 23.3 feet at the southwest corner of the home. The reason for those different setbacks is if you take a look at the survey, you can see that that front yard is at an angle and it's not at a 90 degree, is not 90 degrees. So that's why there's the differences in the front yard setbacks. And those measurements were taken from the first floor. I think there's some pictures in there that you can see that the second floor is cantilevered, and that cantilever is approximately about 2.2 feet. And that's important because that's where the deck is going to be attached to and relates to the variances we're talking to. The 2.2 feet is an approximate measurement based on the survey. And so with that survey, it looks like it appears to be a measurement of 21.1 feet, 21.15 feet from the front, and then 18.1 feet at the northwest corner of the property. The deck plans appear to indicate that the deck is to be 7 feet wide, but the applicant does not provide any information as to exactly what they're proposing for the front yard setback. Based on the 7 foot width, it appears that the applicant is requesting a deck to be 11.1 feet from the northwest corner of the property and 14.2 feet from the southwest corner of the property. The staff is unsure what the applicant means when they state requesting a variance for an additional 4 feet for the north post of the proposed deck expansion. Indicates variance sought in regards to the 15-foot setback, requesting a variance for an additional 4 feet for the north post of the proposed deck expansion in order to be lined with the south. Property slants and does not run parallel to the lot. Based on that information, the applicant's variance application staff believes that the applicant is requesting a 4-foot variance to the front yard requirement, meaning the 15-foot setback minus that 4 feet. So it'd be approximately that 11-foot setback request. The applicant provides the following justifications and hardships for the request. The deck expansion would not impose any hardships or difficulties on the zoning ordinance, nor it would cause any view obstructions from neighbors or disrupt vehicle traffic. Extensive water damage to the west facing house repaired 220, additional sealed ledger board with flashing to help prevent water intrusion, fire egress from the upper level, existing egress only on the north side of the structure, and safety. The excessive speed of vehicle traffic has been ongoing in the neighborhood. We are motivated to expand the overhang deck on our home to assure a safe place for our children to play outside and be supervised. Increased traffic during the summer and vacation rentals have a negative impact on the matter. Plan Commission should be aware what the purpose of the variance is. Purpose of a variance is to provide relief when a strict application of the zoning ordinance requirements would impose unusual practical difficulties or unnecessary physical hardships on the applicant. Practical difficulties or unnecessary physical hardships may result from the size, shape, or dimension, site, or the location of the existing structures, from geologic, topographic, or other conditions on the site or in the immediate vicinity, or from population density, street location, or traffic conditions in the immediate vicinity. There appears to be no extraordinary circumstances, conditions, or hardships applicable to this property or to the intended use of the property, which do not generally apply to other properties in the same zone that justify granting the variance. The applicant does have an existing large second-story deck that runs along the entire north side of the existing home and faces the north side, and a fenced side yard that appears to address many of the safety concerns. And a hardship must be more than an inconvenience or a preference for a more lenient standard. So I can answer any questions if anyone has any.
Are there any questions for Steve?
Just one. Steve, I can't figure out why this is a variance as a. Can you explain to me?
Yeah, we kind of included a little of both the language, the setback reduction as well as the variance. So it is part of it.
What are they requesting the variance from?
The front yard setback to go from, and that's a good question because I don't have anything that tells me specifically what they're asking other than they want it 4 feet closer. So I'm assuming based on the measurements and looking at the setbacks that would be an 11-foot setback.
But so it's more than is allowed by the setback provision then?
That's correct. The front yard setback needs to be 15 feet and they're requesting it to be 11.
Correct, but if we were to grant a setback, bring this under, they could legitimately, we could consider this alone under the setback provision, could we not?
Yes.
So calling it a variance, I'm just, I'll let it go. It's just, I hate to get confused on variance and setback when it might make a difference. I don't think it does here, but okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I actually had that a very similar question is setback reduction versus a variance to the setback requirement. It's 2 different types of applications.
Okay, any other questions for Steve? Okay, we'll move to our public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets on the meeting page of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the person testifying believes apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and parties an opportunity to respond to an issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The Planning Commission shall grant such request by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Their presentation by the applicant.
Hi, PO Box 755. My name is Josiah Stromstead. This is my wife Jocelyn.
Same PO box.
Thank you guys for hearing our requests and being here tonight. Just to clarify why we were here, if there was any confusion, and I'm not sure if everyone has the photographs that we presented. But to explain it a little more clear, if you're not getting the full understanding of the picture, from the south side of our property, if we were to put a deck expansion for egress, it measures out to 7 feet. That being within the setback requirements. If you ran it 7 feet all the way across, by the time you hit the north corner, setback goes. So we're requesting that we would be able to move the post out 4 feet, so we can have just a 7 foot straight deck as far as a triangle looking. Our road is slanted.
Do you agree with the, were you finished?
Yes, for now.
Okay, sure. And we'll come back to you if you have other testimony. We were presented calculations for the setbacks on that south and north as 14.2 and 11.1. Does that seem accurate to you in terms of an assessment of how far back that south and north line are?
Yes, I've measured those out and had personnel from the city come out and double check me and make sure, hey, this is exactly where we're marking this deck out. So
okay,
give accurate measurements. So.
And there was some confusion on the staff's part relative to the 4 foot request. You want to help me out with the confusion? I want to make sure they're given the opportunity.
Yeah, I just, you have a lot of, you show a tape measurement, but there's nothing that says what the actual distance is. So, you know, I'm looking at this and I tried to figure it out based on your survey and I came up with the 11 feet based on your 4 foot side.
You are correct.
Okay.
You are correct.
Yeah.
And I could have been a little more clear on that if I didn't provide all the photos, but the 4 feet would be on the north side of the deck. If we brought it out 4 feet and planted a post right here, that's where we come from 11 feet. It measures 11 feet this way. So you are exactly correct on that. Just to clarify.
Yeah.
But if I ask a quick question anyway, so it didn't really depict it in any of the diagrams that I could look at, but I asked, are you going to actually tie your 2 decks together? In other words, does your proposed deck go all the way out to the outside edge of your existing deck?
Yes, sir.
That would be the that would be the point that we would need the maximum setback reduction. It would be that northern.
Yes,
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Was there anything else you'd like to add?
I guess I'll just add, because I know there's a lot of, I don't know, discussion over hardships and is this a true hardship for us? And I know you mentioned what we have written in the fire egress is an important one. Like we only have the one on the north side of the house. So I would bash a window out and get my kids out the north side if there was a need to, if there was a fire in the back of the house. And I don't think that's a, you know, I don't know, just inconvenience. I think that's a matter of safety for my family. Additionally, safety for our kids just in general. We do have a front driveway that our kids, that's where they choose to play. I don't know why, but that's where it gets the most sun. They like to be out there and playing in that area. We do play in the backyard too, and in the side yard where there is a fence, but they will go out to the front to be in the sun. And that's where we've had to pull our kid out of the street, you know, or like she, you know, we were watching them, but there's just always the fear of them getting hit by a car. Cars drive fast. So having the deck would allow us to have a safe place for them to play in the front of our house in the sun all day. I can watch them directly from anywhere in my house, like the kitchen, the living room, you know, anywhere. So we don't have to actually be physically outside on top of them, worried about pulling them out of the street. So from that, and I don't think I hate that word inconvenience, because nobody's life is an inconvenience, and I would hope that the city would, understand that. We're just trying to protect our family.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I don't know how our conversation is going to go, and I'm not even sure I'm behind what I'm going to ask you. So not a commitment on your part at all. I'm just talking, I'm just spitballing here a little bit. At the beginning of our meeting, you heard a little bit of a discussion around variance, and they can be very contentious in the city sometimes. But if we can justify how we get there, sometimes it makes it easier for us to grant them.
Mhm.
When I first came onto this body, they didn't give an inch, and that's changed quite a bit, and I think for the better. But it's often changed when we have a justification for how we got there. You heard earlier, maybe there was a wall already there, so we felt better about giving pretty substantial reduction. One idea I had as I was just thinking about your plan was, you're practically at the setback down on that south side. You're, well, depending on how 2/10 of an inch is measured, you're almost at 15 feet.
Yeah.
If you held to the setback at that point, and we said it makes sense architecturally to allow this setback to come up here and be in the setback, and so it would, I don't know what the math is, it's 11.1, or maybe by the time we granted, it'd be like, I might get my math wrong here, but slightly different. It would be a shorter deck than you're proposing, but it would at least give us a point of reference within our code to stand by and go, it's fair to have an architectural support for something that doesn't look wiki-wacky. One straight line, one angle. Is that something you'd be open to?
We would be open. to that,
Okay,
yes.
so we'll talk about that. I'm not asking you to commit to it, and I'm not even sure anybody here is going to agree with me. But just an idea. Other questions for the applicant? Questions? Okay. Are there other applicants who are going to present on?
If I may, when we came up with the 7 foot, that's just because we didn't change it on the south side, and we thought that was a respectable size for asking for an additional 4 feet on the other end.
Okay,
I feel like we have supporters, but I don't know that they're going to offer additional information. Our across the street neighbor and then our side to view neighbor to the south are both here in support of the deck.
okay, well, that's important. Even if they don't testify, you can raise your hand and say, yeah. Okay, great. I'll formally ask for proponents after this, and we'll have the opportunity to come back. If you're finished, we can move on to other proponents, and I said we'll come back and give you another chance to talk.
Thanks for.
Thanks for your time.
All right, if there are no other presentations by the applicant, are there presentations or any testimony from proponents? Okay. Proponents. Please come forward.
Alan Gay, 740 West Chinook. I'm obviously across the street, and I watch the kids quite a bit. And I get up on the sidewalk with them because they like to draw, they like to play. And I'm not as spry as I used to be. I'm not as fast as I used to be. But if we could be out in the sun, which is the main reason they want to be there, and blowing bubbles and such, and be safe with a fence around a deck, I would feel a lot more comfortable watching them because they're fast, I'm not. They're young, I'm old. And it would just be a comfort to me to be up there watching them in an enclosed deck in the sun. And I feel that is something that we need. And I'd like to see that.
Thank you, sir. Are there other proponents that would like to come forward? Okay, are there opponents? Is anyone opposed to what's being asked for? Okay, you have another, as the applicant, you have another opportunity. Are you satisfied? Okay, then we will close the public testimony and move to our consideration. Who would like to start?
I don't want to harp on a point, but I was looking at the setback reductions and this could be handled entirely there. And then I look at the standards and there are roughly 8 reasons why we might grant a setback, of which none of them really apply here. So, calling this a variance kind of confuses the issue because it's not really whether there's a hardship from anybody. There's a question whether they meet the requirements for a setback. And I've heard nothing here that suggests that they do.
I think this is a tough one because I have kids myself. I get it. You want to have a safe place to play, but speaking of precedent, which was brought up earlier, if we start creating an explanation or a reason for doing something, I'm afraid that we begin a slippery slope. And pretty soon, every setback reduction that comes before us, there's a precedent of us just, if we like the project, we say yes. If we don't like it, we say no. So I feel like we need to be very clear on criteria and stick with it because we are supposed to be an objective body and not doing this because we personally want to.
Other comments?
Well, I don't know that I've got my comments straight in my head yet, but I think I am more inclined to let a property owner use their own property the way they want to than what I think maybe the rest of us are thinking. I realize that it is it's actually a variance, it's a triangular variance, right? It's the southernmost post is actually right at the setback. And so it's a triangular wedge of deck that comes into the front yard. And, and I don't see how that affects anybody. I've been thinking about what Mike said about, is this a setback reduction or is it a variance? Well, according to the way I read it, it's variance that was requested. And the justifications for a variance are very different to me than for just a setback reduction. I was thinking that number 1, where it says that a strict or literal interpretation and enforcement of the specified requirement would result in practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship and would be inconsistent with the objectives of the comprehensive plan. It's such a small piece for them to achieve something that's clearly important to them. And I don't see that it runs counter to the comprehensive plan in any way. I may be trying to find meaning in trying to read between lines, but I don't think that the request is out of line.
I don't think it's out of line, but we do have a lot of changes coming down the road, and enforcing setback restrictions as they are written is going to be important to us gaining the value out of those as we go forward in tree protection and all this other stuff. And as sympathetic as I am to the family here, that I want my kids to play in my front driveway so they can be in the sun is not one of the criteria. And that setback reduction provision is supposed to implement the comprehensive plan. So it's not something to throw away when you think the comprehensive plan might be to our benefit. So just my opinion.
I don't have a counter.
Well, maybe we don't phrase it as enjoyment of the sun, but we frame it in terms of enjoyment of the property. Are we allowing these people the opportunity to enjoy their property more by granting them something that doesn't affect the community in the ways that we're often trying to protect? Can we, when we have these variances come to us or these requests for something outside of what's done normally, it's because it falls into something that has something that isn't clear or straight. In this case, we have 2 intersecting lines. Architecturally, they could put on a triangular deck on there and get the same thing. it would be funky.
Well, you know what? I don't see architecture as one of the criteria here. That's my problem. And we're continually reminded to live with the code we have, not make up a new one to help people. That's the problem I have.
And I do think if we make property enjoyment a criteria, we have to grant every variance that comes before us, literally every single one.
Okay.
So
Respect.
I'm very, very worried about bending rules that then leads us down the path that the next person comes and says, well, last time when you granted it, is my need different from the previous person? And I am worried about that slippery slope.
So without the variance, this deck is 7 feet wide at one side and it drops down to 3 feet at the side where it ties into I couldn't tell from the measurements where it would be when you have to make the corner at the corner of the building. It wasn't, it is technically triangular, but it's a 3 foot or a 4 foot over the span of, I think that's 20 feet.
The problem I have,
And
respectfully, it's not, this isn't about whether they build a triangular deck or not.
no, I was just saying
Grant a
it's not-
setback reduction.
I was just saying that's not. And as a practicality, that's not a massive difference, like.
It can be done.
It can be done, it's not practically that, visually that different, it's not. So denying the request doesn't create a hardship that we're trying to avoid.
Well,
So I guess is what I'm trying to say.
they can't, without the setback, cannot build a deck.
They could,
They
it would just
can.
be triangular.
It just wouldn't be 7 feet across, it would be
Just that
7 feet and then 4 feet
Or it would simply be
or just be 5 feet.
4 foot wide deck instead of their
Yeah.
requested. So,
Yeah.
you know,
It would be 7 feet to 2 feet. Correct.
Technically,
be it,
the last, when the testimony's shut, we gotta hold it. Sorry.
Sorry.
You're fine. Well, one more motion, see where we're at. Further discussion?
Yeah, I think we need.
We kind of have the conversation.
Right.
So the photo is A1. I probably should have asked the applicant a little bit more clarity when it was open, but that is the proposed location of the post. That's not the location that it would be if they followed the setback. Okay, so that is the proposed location at the 11.1 foot setback. Okay. And so the post itself would be essentially 4.8 feet
Right.
left of that.
Right.
If without the setback. Yes.
Right, that's how I understood the testimony.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Just looking at there was a point I missed and my apologies to everybody. I still, if I look at what was written here, the whole deck as it is proposed, shrinks that front yard setback back at a minimum to 0.2 feet. So I missed that point. I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead, Les, if you.
no, I don't have anything. I mean, I can completely understand, the position that, setbacks are there for a reason and we need to protect them because they're always under threat. I'm just struggling a little bit with trying to figure out where we need to protect and where, what would be a legitimate setback reduction. I mean, we have granted some for different reasons. But I don't know that I can think of a case exactly like this. Not in my recollection.
Seems like often we're granting them an instance when the structures say can't be built in its current location.
That would be the whole.
Or, you know, to save a tree. I mean.
Or save a tree, but you know, there's something a little bit more substantive about the hardship than whether there's deck added or not.
You know, and those are the kind of things that are listed under 64.010, where, you know, you have to meet one of the 7 or 8 criteria, you know, A through H, you know, and that's the one that we're usually looking at. Tree protection or protection of views, that kind of thing. But when you go to the variant side, those aren't nearly so clear. They all are subject to somebody's opinion.
They're gonna need to be clear and objective in the future.
Well, they might need to be clear and objective in the future, but today they're not, I don't think.
I have yet to hear anybody explain to me why we're even talking about the variance provisions here. It seems like they're well within the setback requirements.
And I can't argue, and unless Steve can enlighten us further, it looks to me like it's a choice. You can either go, you could go either way.
Okay, well then let's do that.
And so what we were asked to consider was a variance to setback requirements. We weren't asked.
So that is exactly where you're gonna be setting precedents, because you're gonna, yeah.
Just trying to make a decision. And I completely would understand, I truly do the letter of the law, you know. Sometimes
I feel the same way.
make them work too.
Well, they say the law is an ass, right? And it is, but it is the law.
Well, and if we're looking at variances, the 0.0, like you said, it's not very clear and objective. So anything that we decide does set that future precedence. This is the way we decided on this non-clear and non-objective standard that we have in our thing, because we have the language in here, results in practical difficulty or unnecessary. Like that's a determination of whether or not something is unnecessary or something is practical. The extraordinary circumstances is a judgment call of what's extraordinary and what's not extraordinary. It's not very clear.
Bill?
And I hesitate to insert myself in here but the discussion of clear and objective, I think, is a bit of a tangent. The clear and objective is about regulating housing. And so the idea is that if you fit in the box, you have to make a clear and objective box. If somebody doesn't fit in that box, and then they go to variance, and that can be a not clear and a judgment call. So I won't get wrapped around the wheel on clear and objective in this case.
Sounds like you just have confirmed that we're just wandering along, because that's kind of where we are.
You do have the guidance that is in the criteria about, within the setback reduction and variance, periods that are applying for a variance. So, there is some wandering, some judgment, that's what you were appointed to do, was use your knowledge of the community and skills to determine what.
We also got some guidance on this from staff, and it's, the purported justifications do not meet the standard for hardship.
Yeah, I did say that. I put a mark against that. I believe the applicants, real intent was to find a place for their kids to play. I mean, that's just my opinion. And I don't see that as necessarily the same as a hardship or an inconvenience. I think that's important. Now, if it made any difference that the deck was 6 foot deep instead of 7 foot, I would suggest an alternative, but it really doesn't make any difference. There's really not anything that that we can do that, makes it just close enough that it feels okay then. And I understand that. I just think that in this case, it made sense.
Why don't we try a couple motions? If one fails, the other one's obvious, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So let me make a motion first. I move that we reject this setback variance request.
And I would second that.
Any further discussion? Tessa, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
No.
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusik,
No.
Chair Newton.
Yes. The variance is denied. Let's take a 2-minute break.
Yeah.
And then come back to on that. Okay, thanks for your patience, everybody. We have another quasi judicial hearing. Public hearing 2401 Miller Nash on behalf of Stephanie Inn LLC requesting a conditional use permit. Miller Nash on behalf of Stephanie Inn LLC requesting a conditional use permit for purpose of replacing the deteriorating beachfront protected structure. Property is located at 2740 Pacific Avenue, tax 200, 5300, 5400, at 51031 AD in a residential motel zone. The request will be reviewed against the criteria of the municipal code, chapter 17.8, conditional use. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the planning commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias? Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit? Site visit. And we have the staff report.
Good evening. The applicant requests a conditional use approval for a replacement shoreline stabilization structure at the Stephanie Inn at 2740 South Pacific Street. This application does not include the carriage house located on the north side of Matanuska Street from the main building. The new revetment would replace a dilapidated structure that was originally approved in September 1999 through conditional use 99-04, which itself replaced a wooden seawall that was damaged through storm activity. The revetment improved in 1999 is in a condition where repairs would effectively constitute the construction of a new structure. A geotechnical report prepared by H.G. Slicker and Associates includes evaluation of other potential means of erosion control, including dynamic revetment such as sand and cobble berms, and concludes that installation of a new vegetated riprap revetment will be the most effective means of erosion control at the property. The subject property is eligible for a shoreline stabilization structure as development existed on the property on January 1st, 1977. Moving through the applicable criteria, these are found in the oceanfront management zone and also in the conditional uses. Starting in the oceanfront management zone, the staff comment is that the underlying zone is RM or residential motel, and shoreline stabilizations are a conditionally permitted use in that zone. Conditional approval of shoreline stabilization is permitted on lots that consist of beach, active dunes, or other foredunes that are conditionally stable and that are subject to wave overtopping or ocean undercutting, or interdune areas that are subject to ocean flooding. As this is a structural improvement, it will be necessary for the applicant to obtain a shoreline alteration permit from Oregon Parks and Recreation Department prior to the start of work. Application materials do not indicate if OPRD has been contacted regarding this proposal. However, a shoreline alteration permit does require a local land use authorization before it can be issued. As per condition approval number 1, the proposal conditionally meets the criteria of this item. Moving into the conditional uses for shoreline stabilization. The Schlicker and Associates geotechnical report states the site will need a shoreline protective structure to protect from erosion resulting from wave activity. Historical photos in Exhibit A5 show the property prior to the 1999 conditional use permit show significant erosion and thrown logs and other debris that resulted from a storm event. The installation of a shoreline stabilization structure does not affect traffic or other facilities. The revetment will be located between publicly accessible beach accesses on Matanuska Street and Nelchina Street. A stormwater outfall is located adjacent to the Nelchina Street access. This outfall will not be affected by the proposed revetment. The preliminary background and engineering geological design considerations for oceanfront protective structures report prepared by Schlicker and Associates contains design recommendations and schematics for the proposed revetment. These materials indicate that the revetment would be installed in a manner consistent with the shape and form of other nearby structures. The geotechnical report details the nature of materials and vegetation on the bluff slope. Design schematics, including a structural cross-section, are included. The intent of the improvement is to preserve soils and prevent future hazards that may result from future erosion. Although this revetment is considered structural, it does not use features such as the foundation that one would find in a structure regulated under the building code, and it is not designed for human habitation. Therefore, the life, health, safety aspect of this provision that would be used for a habitable structure does not apply to the proposal. Installation of a shoreline stabilization structure will not affect beach access, nor will it have any impact on transportation or traffic flows. The application materials indicate that the revetment will be constructed in a manner that is consistent with other vegetated shoreline stabilization structures in the area. The Ocean Lodge, which is immediately south of the subject property, has a non-vegetated riprap revetment which is visually distinct from surrounding improvements. Due to the project's location on the border of the state vegetation line, the project will require coordination with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. As has been covered, this will require the applicant to receive a shoreline alteration permit from Oregon Parks and Rec. This permit will effectively function as a second conditional use permit issued by the state and ensures that the project is compliant with Oregon revised statutes 640, 397.15, and 397.25. The applicant's proposal will replace a vegetated riprap structure that is in a condition where it cannot be repaired, and a repair would effectively amount to a replacement. The geotechnical reports and alternatives analysis detail the suitability of higher priority erosion control measures and discusses the applicant's observations of the effectiveness of these measures at other properties in the beach. The Schlicker and Associates geotechnical report details the rate of erosion for unprotected bluff segments, with materials typical to those on the site, and concludes that a structural revetment is necessary to slow erosion and reduce the possibility of rapid erosion during a storm event. The replacement structure will likely be similar to current conditions after vegetation is established. The existing beach accesses that flank the Stephanie Inn will be unaffected by the proposal, and there will be no long-term cost to the public as a result of the project. The applicant's effect analysis, Exhibit A6, reviews non-structural and other structural methods of mitigating erosion control. Non-structural means of control are described as being unsuitable due to their low resiliency, frequency and cost of maintenance, and potential for cobblestones to become projectiles within a storm surge. And there has been a request for a continuance made by Friends of the Dunes that was forwarded to members of the Planning Commission earlier this morning. The application was submitted on May 13th of this year, and it was determined to be complete on May 29th. Under the 120-day rule, the city must make a final decision no later than September 25th, 2024. And that concludes the staff report.
What was the September date? 24?
September 25th.
25. Thank you. Has there been any additional correspondence since this afternoon around 2 o'clock?
No.
All right, we'll move to public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted. Sorry, any questions for staff before we move on? You guys good? Okay. Moving to public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets on the meeting page of the city's website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed to those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the person testifying believed applied to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidence you're hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Presentation about the applicant.
Thank you, Chair Newton. I am Will Rasmussen on behalf of the applicant, Stephanie N. My mailing address is 1140 South Washington Street in Portland, Suite 700. I'm here in support of the application, obviously. I just hope to cover three things today: the background of where this application is coming from, the need for it, i.e. why they need to be protected from the ocean, and address the kind of the key approval criteria related to this application. But before I dive into that, I just want to create space if any commissioners have any questions out of the gate, or I suck up all the air in this room.
I was out there today and looked at the wall next door.
Yeah, to the south.
To the south.
Yes.
Is that similar to what like your client would like to see?
That's similar to what we're proposing, but our revetment's actually less impactful. That revetment has rock of the type and quality that we would use in our revetment, size the same. It might even come from the same quarry, but they didn't bury that in sand and put vegetation on top of it. And their slope is 1 and ours is 1/2 to 1. Ours is a little flatter. So our proposal will have less of a visual impact on the community, and our proposal will actually wear better by having a little bit flatter slope, less likely to erode when the water does come up and get rough on it. Great question. Thank you. I was there today too. I don't know what it is, but every time I come to Cannon Beach, it's 75 degrees and sunny.
Any excuse to get out there today.
You should probably move.
I keep looking into that and it doesn't pencil yet. I would love
working on that one.
I would love to at some point. I've had the pleasure of coming out to Cannon Beach. I checked for 14 years now in land use processes representing different people in this community. And I greatly appreciate the volunteers in this body for spending their time and energy getting into the weeds on the planning code. I know it's difficult when variances and such things come up, but it's absolutely necessary part for a functioning land use system here in Oregon. So thank you for your service. On the background, Stephanie N's been at that location for over 3 decades. In the mid to late 90s, they got hit with a number of larger storms that directly impacted the main structure, the main lodge. Waves were coming up and hitting the lodge. As Mr. St. Clair mentioned, at Exhibit A5, for those who are tracking in the PDF, it's page 150. There's just a few pictures from the 1999 storm of the large logs that the ocean picked up and kind of rammed into the front of the building and broke some windows. That is kind of class 1 property damage. This site is a uniquely low site in Cannon Beach. You don't think about it when you walk by it, but if you look real closely, you'll see its elevation is actually lower than the surrounding properties. That property, even to the south that Chair Newton was talking about, Stephanie, is a little bit lower than that. It's mapped into the highest class risk in FEMA's flood map for coastal erosion. That's in the record on page 87 of your PDF if you want to look at it. Stephanie first addressed this in 1999 by requesting a revetment. The city reviewed it under the same approval criteria that we're here looking at today and approved a conditional use for that revetment, and then the state approved it subsequently. There's been a lot of discussion of precedent here tonight in the city trying to follow what it's done before and trying to not one-off one owner or another. And there's really as clear precedent as you're ever going to find. Same exact property, same approval criteria, almost exactly, and same revetment in the same place. So we hope you continue to follow your precedent. Today, as staff mentioned, the revetment is in a degraded condition. These things have a certain wear life. It was put out there 25 years ago, and the storms are unfortunately getting bigger and worse, and tides are getting higher along the Oregon coast. And we had HG Slicker assess it. They're the geotech firm that's done the most work for coastal erosion in the state of Oregon. Adam Large is their chief geologist. He looked at this site and determined that it's absolutely necessary to replace this revetment, and that it be done rather than later. Stephanie Inn owns that main lodge that everybody thinks about with the bulky part that comes out. They also own the property to the north across Matanuska. It's often called the carriage house. This application is just for the land in front of the main lodge. It does not include the carriage house, and it doesn't include the Matanuska right of way. The right of way was excluded at City Public Works request. We were agnostic, gladly would do it or not. I respectfully request that the commission approve this application for two simple reasons. There's absolutely demonstrated need, and it meets the approval criteria. On the demonstrated need, both the city's approval criteria and the state's approval criteria focus on whether property needs to be protected from immediate risk of danger of damage. And as the photos in the application package show, and in the mapping from both the state and the federal authorities, this is one of the highest risk properties in the city. Unfortunately, it sits really low, doesn't have much protection absent that kind of degraded berm that's there now. And there's absolutely a demonstrated need. The State Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, commonly called DOGAMI, has a hazard database for coastal inundation. This site, as you would expect, is on the high risk side of that mapping. They also have maps for landslide risk, which includes this site because the shoreline bluff that exists in front of the lodge just erodes away if it's not protected by the revetment. The engineers from Schlicker, Adam Large, the chief geologist there, concluded that the site is, quote, extremely susceptible to severe erosion. That's in your package and Exhibit A4, page 122 of the commission PDF. The property is also one of only a handful of properties in all of the city that is within the FEMA's most severe coastal flood areas zone. It's called Zone VE. It's also known as the Coastal High Hazard Area. That's in your package at page 87. It's also within one of the few structures within the city that is within the limit of the moderate wave action boundary, which is the high designation area historically known for causing significant property damage. Again, those photos in your package at Exhibit A5. This is just, it's both mapped and demonstrated damage, one of the most vulnerable spots in the city. Also, unfortunately, globally speaking, as this commission is probably painfully aware, Oregon is experiencing more severe winter storms, worse king tides, and several experts, which we quote and cite in our submittal materials, conclude that the Oregon coast is just likely to continue to see bigger, worse winter storms with higher king tides, making a vulnerable site like Stephanie Inn even more vulnerable. It met the criteria for need back in 1999. Storms are getting worse. It meets it even more so today in 2024. Shifting to compliance with the approval criteria in the code. There's dozens of approval criteria that apply. You've got the conditional use approval criteria in 1780, the oceanfront management overlay in 1782, and the geologic hazards criteria in 17. For the sake of any of us ever seeing this beautiful day, I'm not going to go through all of those. I'm just going to hit a couple of the highest points, kind of the most key critical approval criteria. I'd gladly discuss any of them if any of them are of interest to any of the commissioners. First, in chapter 1750-040, that's the section for geologic, requires a geologic site investigation for development on hazard sites. As I mentioned, hired Adam Large, chief geologist for Schlicker, to assess the site. His report is included in your package at Exhibit A4. Assesses the specific conditions of the site. Existing revetment is performing, and concludes that based on all those things, a vegetated revetment structure is necessary and the least impactful protective measure that would provide sufficient protection for the Stephanie Inn. Section 1742.050B1 generally calls for applicants to address adverse effects that the development might have on adjacent areas. As I mentioned to Chair Newton earlier, the applicant is doing all known measures to mitigate the impacts of putting in this replacing this vegetated revetment. It is using the same footprint of the existing revetment. It's aligned with the revetment immediately to the south. I think it's the Ocean Lodge. The Ocean Lodge. It will be buried in 2 feet of sand and then planted on top with beach grass and other native species. I also took a walk down the beach in front of the Stephanie Inn, and beautiful. If I went gone further, but I was wearing my work loafers and was already beating them up hard enough. And you can really tell which revetments were done recently and which ones were not. Which ones I could tell. Most people couldn't tell there was a revetment where the newer ones are. I don't know if anybody's walked by the day site, the day application you guys heard some while ago. If you haven't, I'd encourage you to go look at it. It looks like sand with grass on top, and it's not perfect by any means, but it's much better than, say, what it looks like in front of the Ocean Lodge or some of these sites where there's just piles of boulder that nobody tried to think about the visual impact to the beach going public and neighbors. Section 1780.230D. This is probably what I consider kind of the most important criteria, the most central criteria for this application. That's the criterion on the city's prioritization, shoreline stabilization. It lists 5 different types, you might recall, of shoreline stabilization that can be considered, and ranks them in the order that the city would like, the city prefers. If the first one is available, do that. If it works to mitigate the risk from damage, do that. First one is property maintenance of existing riparian vegetation. The second is planting of new riparian vegetation. The third is a vegetated riprap. That's obviously what we're proposing here. The fourth option is a non-vegetated riprap. That's more impactful. And the most impactful, least favored, is having a bulkhead or a seawall. The Stephanie Inn took this directive really seriously to try to mitigate, to try to pick the least impactful protective structure. It not only considered those 5, it considered at least 5 other options, which we included in an alternatives analysis and assessing what can be used to protect this site from the ocean hazard. That's in your package at Exhibit A6, page 151. That alternatives analysis gets several other things we considered to try at the site. Beach scraping, beach nourishment, just dumping a bunch of sand there, sandbags, a dynamic revetment or cobble berm, putting a bunch of cobble out there, sand burritos, and vegetative stabilization. After taking that hard look, unfortunately, it was determined that the least impactful and still effective mitigation measure would be a revetment, but a covered and vegetated one. It cites to if you look at the alternatives analysis, you'll see we cite to the kind of the most current literature on where vegetated burritos work and where sand berms work. And the combination of the elevation of the site being really low and the high erosive rating, basically the frequency of high erosive events that happen at that location in the North Coast is mapped by the feds, is to say that the bags would get destroyed and strung out across the beach, and vegetation would get pulled out in the first big storm without the kind of rocks under them. Liquor and Associates concluded, quote, that vegetative or other non-structural means of protecting the bluff or berm are not appropriate or recommended, and a vegetated riprap revetment is the least impactful method that is feasible to provide protection for the site. In conclusion, Stephanie Inn's been a good neighbor and local employer in this town for over 3 decades. It needs protection, as has previously been determined from the increasingly intense king tides. It meets the approval criteria for a conditional use permit, as demonstrated by the city's own prior approval in 1999 under the same approval criteria, and about 175 pages of materials we provided meeting the approval criteria. I respectfully, planning commission, consider and approve this application. One last little detail, heard that a request came in for a continuance on this application. To keep this application on track for the 120-day, get it done by September 25th. If knowing that it might be necessary to have an appeal through city council, applicant respectfully requests that the city process that continuance under the 777 process that it's used on other applications to try to keep them moving along, where anybody, Friends of the Dunes, or anybody who's interested can submit anything they want for 7 days. Any interested party can respond to that for 7 days, and applicant can have 7 days to issue rebuttal argument, not new evidence. 7 days, that follows a state statutory process for such continuances. Thank you very much for the time. I'll gladly answer any questions that there might be.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Rasmussen?
Can you explain a little bit better what is actually failing right now? What's the sign of failure?
There's a couple of things. Rocks are getting pulled out to the ocean. The size of rocks that was used in 1999 was considered best practices in 1999, but they're actually 2 to 3 foot rocks, and their density is less than what's recommended now. So I went to law school. I didn't go to geologic school or like that. And I'm not a contractor. I'm embarrassing with a hammer. But apparently you can have a 2 foot by 2 foot rock, or a 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot cube of basalt. And that might weigh different depending on how dense it is. So the rocks are smaller and they're less dense. So some of them are actually getting pulled out to the beach, which the experts at Schlicker point out is a hazard and not favored. And we have spoken, Mr. Sinclair asked if we'd had a pre-application meeting with OPRD. We have, and the state acknowledged, yeah, they don't want to see those rocks out on the beach.
I have a response, but I would like to let Robert speak.
Yeah, just following up on Will's comment there, the condition of the structure is effectively about maybe half existent at this point in time. It's very dilapidated. So we had previously discussed the possibility of whether or not this could be repaired, and the determination was made that it could not be repaired because that would effectively result in a completely new structure. So that's why it's effectively eroded to the point that it's no longer extant.
But it's still protecting the property. The property hasn't.
It's a protective
image with the current.
It hasn't yet, but it's as noted in the reports, its protective capacity is diminished. And it's an unknown amount of time before a big enough storm comes along that pushes those logs through windows again.
And when I was looking at the HGSA report, when they talked about, for instance, burritos, all they focused on was the fact that it requires maintenance. So I didn't see something in the report that said it absolutely would not work. What I saw was the burritos fall apart, but part of undertaking this would be that you need to maintain it. So I'm just trying to understand further why the burritos wouldn't work.
Yeah, the Schlicker.
It looks to me like it's a maintenance issue.
There's 2 Schlicker reports in there.
Okay.
There's one at A2 and one at like A6 or 7. The best analysis regarding why burritos don't work is actually in the alternatives analysis, which I think is A6. Let me get you the exact one.
A6, 150.
So that runs through about a half dozen alternative measures we considered, including the burritos. I believe the issue with the burritos is, given the rate of erosion in this location, that they'd be washed out so frequently, they would both be ineffective and result in garbage on the beach. I believe it was this Smeagol's or the Spiegels came in and got an approval from this body to do several lesser protective measures a little bit south of Stephanie Inn, and their stuff washed out, I think, within a year. And so it's both not serving the effect, the desired effect of protecting the property, and it's leaving plastic or biodegradable plastic on the beach.
And then the last question I would have is that you talked about impacts to surrounding landowner properties.
Mhm.
One of the impacts that we also need to consider is what happens to the beach. So when there's a revetment like this, the beach gradually becomes smaller for the public to use. That's from OPRD's presentation to us last summer. That was a stated fact. So I'm just wondering, when you did your analysis, did you stop to ask what is the dynamic that is occurring because of this revetment on public property, not just a neighboring privately owned property?
So there, I want to make sure I understand your question right. Are you talking about the physical occupation of the beach because there's rocks on the beach?
No, I'm talking about the fact that the beach over time will actually become smaller when you have a,
Okay, you're talking about.
that meant that does.
Effect of preventing replenishment of sand.
Exactly, right. So there is a public property impact that didn't appear to have been analyzed.
I absolutely can submit supplemental information on that if you like. And I will. It sounds like we're going to have a continuance. If you nod in any direction like this, I will submit supplemental information.
I think that we just want
That issue,
we consider.
absolutely, yeah, I agree. That's absolutely a real issue. That's a real dynamic. It's documented in all sorts of literature in Oregon and around the world that if you get a long, solid stretch of revetment, that can reduce the ability for a beach to replenish. All I would say is if you take that to an extreme, you would not have a revetment anywhere in Oregon. And the approval criterion that, this body needs to consider and OPRD needs to consider is largely criteria that says, we don't like these things. But if there's a structure that's at risk of damage from coastal erosion, and there's not a better way to prevent it, you can get a revetment. And then if you're going to do that, do it in the least impactful way, buried in sand, put vegetation on top of it. So there's also all sorts of complexity on how individual littoral cells, areas of water swirling in the ocean, replenish different areas, such that some areas having upland revetments are more impactful on depleting long-term beach sand, and some places they're less so. Generally having a stretch of land that's not hundreds of yards, but it's, measured in feet. I think we're talking 300 feet here, 200 feet. It's of linear feet has a negligible impact. Now, I, as an Oregonian, care about that issue because cumulatively, if you permit this stuff too far and wide, over a century, you will lose your beaches. But I have not heard that Cannon Beach is at risk of that yet. I will do some research in the next 7 days.
That'd be great.
Follow up.
Other questions from Mr. Esper?
Actually, I was considering the impact of your proposal. Actually, I was curious about impact to the neighboring properties.
Yeah.
There was a statement that you made, or that was made anyway, that says, anyway, that the riprap revetment will either taper into the bluff and wrap around, minimizing end effects on neighbors' parcels. But I really didn't understand, I couldn't find anything that backed that up. And I was curious if that was, do we really know what's going to happen on a big, I consider it a big revetment project, how the properties to the left and right are going to be affected? Is that?
So there's the tapering is because there's a risk with the end of a revetment. So if you have a long line of rock and then you end it, there's a risk that at the end of that, if you do it the wrong way, it can cause heightened erosive effect, increased avulsion, greater erosion at that next property over. Because of that, I originally came to talk to the city about doing a straight revetment in front of the Stephanie and main structure and the carriage house, and include those two right of ways, Matt Nuska and Chana down there, whatever those two right of ways are, just do it straight, which appears to be how it was permitted in 99. City Public Works said they really don't want us messing around in the street right of ways and doing development there. So we excluded those. When you take those chunks out, there's really no reason to do the carriage house. It's at a higher elevation. But the Schlicker report says that if we do have an end, they'll do whatever needs to be done or can be done to decrease that evulsive effect. The primary one is doing that wrap end thing. So that instead of having a hard just go and stop, they kind of wrap that edge around into the existing bluff some to prevent something about that. Again, I'm not the geologic engineer, prevents that impact on that neighbor. The neighbor to the south, just in the last 3 or 4 years, put in that revetment that the chair was asking about. And to the north, it's right of way in the carriage house, our own property. So wouldn't have an impact to anybody to the north.
Other questions?
Do you have an expected lifespan for this? The existing one lasted from that until now. That wasn't.
Yeah, I'll ask that question and include it in my little supplement that I'm going to do in the next 7 days.
Okay, and then have you guys had intrusion of water in these recent storm events? I know Surf Sand has got some damage to their lower floors. Have you in the king tides these last couple of years? Has Stephanie been impacted by those?
We have had water come into the building.
We've had water come into the building. Glad to help.
You're gonna get, has it been like the direct wave action, like what Surf Sand, or has the wall, the existing been prevented?
Kind of burble up from below, or did it come over?
Over.
It did come over.
Okay.
And my understanding is, I don't know if you're particularly interested, that the waves tend to come up from the south at that point. So it's not coming straight from the west, but kind of they're coming in from an angle from the south. And as a result, there's kind of a more impacted spot on the south side of the building.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the new proposed revetment is at the top elevation is the same?
Yeah.
Top elevation is the existing one?
It's the same top elevation this one was permitted to, because the top of the actual rocks are buried there. We can't see where the top of the actual rocks are today unless we scrape the whole thing off, which we need a permit to do anyway. But the design is the same top elevation.
Okay. And then I had one last question that's just nitpicky about the vegetation that's being proposed to be planted on there. So yeah, native willow is one of them, and then the invasive European grass was one of the other ones that was.
Was it?
That was proposed. I was just wondering if you guys were stuck on that, or if OPRD had specific recommendations. You've talked to them about what
OPRD will have specific recommendations, which basically become what we end up doing when we go through the OPRD process. I am not wedded to any European grass.
Okay, yeah, most of our beach has European and American beach grass, which are both invasive to our coast. But that's mostly what people end up planting, and I just wasn't sure if OPRD would be happy with.
OPRD
has continued planting.
OPRD has a new biologist. I don't know how new he is to OPRD, but he's become their point person biologist for coastal plantings over the last 2 years. I hadn't run into him before, and he really has a local native bent. So my guess is that he's going to suggest we do something native, but I do not know.
Okay, yeah, and the coastal willows are a native plant that was proposed. Another one, the European beach grass is not, and I wasn't sure if that had gone through any other review other than just internally with you guys.
No, it's just been internal so far, and I fully expect OPRD will give us conditions on what to plant there, both type of plant and density.
Okay.
Other questions? Anything further?
I'll hang out in case there's any need for rebuttal, but if you just go forward.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Other presentations by the applicant?
No, I suspect Scott will chat just when you call for general proponents, but no further presentation.
Okay, great. I'll make it formal. Any further presentations by proponents? Excuse me, the applicant?
None.
No. Any presentations by proponents?
I'd like to see.
Please come forward.
I'm Scott Crookshank and I'm Chief Operating Officer for Martin North. So I work for the owners of the Stephanie Inn. And as many of you know, the Stephanie Inn is a family-owned business. It's been here for, I think we celebrated our 31st year last year. And before that, it was the Viking Motel. So it's been in the Steve Martin, Jan Martin, and now Stephanie Snyder family for decades. And appreciate it. PO Box 219, Cannon Beach.
Thank you.
Be formal, but this particular site, as everybody knows, and as Mr. Rasmussen has clearly said, is very susceptible to the effects of the ocean. And I will tell you that yes, the structure is important to us, but equally as important is the safety of our staff and our guests. We worry every winter when the king tides come about what impacts there will be to that facility, to the point to where we literally board up the lower windows, just hoping nothing happens. We do have history of logs coming up on the lawn. Prior to the current structure, logs came through the windows. They've even come up Matanuska even. You see some pictures of logs coming way up there. We do see ourselves as very concerned with the community and the environment. And we want to make sure that the structure is done in a way that it's respectful of those things. But this really to us is about safety and not only protecting the structure, but protecting our guests and our 80 employees that are there every day trying to take care of those guests. So appreciate your time listening today and just want to share how important this is to us. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you. Any other people, presentations by proponents? No one on that? Opponents? Would anyone like to come forward now in opposition to this proposal? Okay. Mr. Rasmussen, would you like any further? We do have a hand up. Oh, sorry. Can't tell who it is.
Diane Turner.
Mr. Turner, please go ahead.
Hello, this is Diana Turner. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Friends of the Dunes of Cannon Beach. And my PO box is 211 Cannon Beach 97110. I am asking for a continuation of this issue. As Will stated, it is a large package, 175 pages. Like Will, I am not an engineer or a geologist and nor a lawyer. So this is quite a lot of material to go through. And while our position as a group is, against the rush to riprap, supported by OPRD and DLCD, as you all learned last July in their presentation. I would like to have time to look at this specifically and address the specific application. I do appreciate the Stephanie Inn and their place in the community, their desire to protect the beach, their staff, and provide a safe beach for the public. But as I said, I would like to be able to respond specifically to this application. So I hope that you will allow more time to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for Diane. Diane, did you hear the proposal for 777 review?
I did. I'm always going to want more time. That's, I'll follow your guys' lead and do the best I can.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Are there other presentations by opponents? Okay, Mr. Rasmussen, would you like to respond to anything you've heard?
I'd just say, I respect what Friends of the Dunes, wanting to take a look at this. It's just, this might be the single most appropriate property in Cannon Beach for a replacement revetment. It's mapped in every high risk category there is by the state and the feds. It's already there. There's a revetment already there. As Scott mentioned, 80 people make their living there. So I hope that when the Cannon Beach Planning Commission gets to considering this, I really do hope you decide to approve it On the continuation, if you don't do something like, giving like the 777, I know this body has done that before. You'd be coming back here in the end of July. And then there'd be new information presented to you there, potentially. Could have Diana, you could have somebody we haven't even heard from yet, you could have me, you almost certainly will have me coming and dumping a bunch of new information on you, responding to whatever we're hearing from other people. That would then push your decision to August. And you're leaving the city council no time if you end up with a contested decision there, which I really hope we don't. I hope everybody kind of looks at this and says, we don't like proof evidence, but gosh, it meets the approval criteria. If anybody meets the approval criteria, it's this. So I would just respectfully submit that if you don't do something like a 777, you're really going to end up with a 120-day problem and with the city council potentially in a really uncomfortable spot. But thank you very much for the time to talk today, and I appreciate everybody's attention on a beautiful, beautiful Thursday evening.
Thank you. Thank you. No further presentations by any applicant?
No.
Okay.
Unless you guys have any questions, I'm going to go.
Great. Thank you again. Okay, with that, we will close the public portion of this consideration and move to our consideration.
No, before you start your consideration, there was a request for a
Yeah.
continuance, and that's, you should wait till all the evidence is in before your consideration, so it's relatively simple. You need to kick it over, and the question is, how do you want to do that? You heard the applicant request the 777 to go through that again. 7 days for anybody, whether they're present tonight or not, to submit additional evidence, argument, anything they want. Second 7 days would be for anybody to respond to anything that came in during that first 7 days. And then the third 7 day period would be for the applicant and applicant alone to submit argument, no new evidence. So that's 777, which would then, you would come back at your July meeting with the record closed and sort of go right into deliberation on it. The alternative is a continuance, which would, at the July hearing, anybody could get up and provide oral testimony, submit any written testimony that they want. At that hearing, somebody could have the opportunity to say, new evidence is coming in, I want an opportunity to respond to that, and then you'd be further down the road. So that's the 777 has the benefit of having a very contained timeline and issue to a decision in July. However, there are probably people who want to be able to present to you in person, and that is something that a lot of people value, but it does put timeline in jeopardy with the, this September 25th, I think was deadline for the 120 day. And that's the decision you want to make, the 777 route or the hearing.
We've put city council in that position before, though. Not that they like us for it. And just because new evidence is submitted in July does not mean we have to grant a second continuance.
What you have to allow is somebody an opportunity to respond to it. And so that'd be a 7 day period after that, and then the applicant always gets a set day. So if in fact you continue it to July, there's a decent possibility that you'll end up not being able to make a decision until August. Not definitive, but it's possible.
Okay.
Thoughts? Have we been in that position before?
I don't remember
where we were forced to do the second
I don't remember.
continuance.
I don't remember that. And I can't think of a time. We may have done it,
I know we've done
but I
it.
don't know that we were forced to do it.
I didn't know that was an option. Could be forced to the second continuance.
Well, and if you think about it, I mean,
It's always a game of, I want a chance to respond to that new evidence that just came in, sort of different ways to.
So I'm inclined to suggest that we do the 7, 7, and 7. The only opposition that chose to speak to us tonight was Ms. Turner, who requested a continuance, and then when Mr. Bates asked if she had heard the 7, 7, and 7, she really didn't say, I have to have more time. I mean, I don't see that we were asked to do anything other than 7, 7, 7, and the benefits to us as a body are, I think, pretty evident when we can do it that way.
I agree with Les. Oh,
Okay.
wow. Maybe I should change my
Full
mind.
statement.
Gavel? Other thoughts?
No, I'm in that same boat as the person who requested it. It was Diane Turner that made the initial written request, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, she made it seem like she can work with that anyways. It's always wants more time. Everyone always wants more time to consider things. But it didn't seem like it was a need for that, and the applicant himself suggested that as well.
Yeah, how many pages is this application?
It is large.
The application, but the staff report, so 175, if you count that.
So, I don't like the fact that we could get pinched on the timing. That would be the fact it's 175 pages, and I've said this before, we often don't have enough time as a body to look this over. 1 week from Thursday to Thursday, it's just not enough time. And then you get some of this more complicated. It's really tough. So, now we're granting 2 weeks. Maybe that's reasonable. But for me, it's one of those where I look at it like still not enough time to really go through something like that. But I don't want us to get pinched, so.
One alternative you might consider is, instead of 7 for the first period, have 14 days and then 7, 7. What that does is brings it out to 28 days, which means staff will not necessarily have time to fully review what comes in that last period. But that may add a little more time up front for people to absorb the amount of material in it.
Does that get us away from that second, potential second request for?
That was the record complete by your hearing, but that means that the applicant may submit their final written argument 2 or 3 days before your hearing.
I kind of like that. It seems like a good compromise.
Steve and Robert, is that workable for you?
So looking at a calendar, 14/7/7 would put us, so the 14-day period would expire on July 11th. The first 7 would be the 18th, and then the second 7 would be the 25th, which is the date of the next meeting.
It would move it.
Funny how that works.
10/7/7.
We get to just kind of grab numbers.
Over 7.
Okay.
Or not less than 7.
Let's do it.
10/7/7?
Mhm.
Is that what? Right.
Sounds like we have any numbers.
Yeah, hands on that.
Jackpot.
Sooner or later. Because you just said it falls on Sunday, would that work better than have it fall on that Monday,
So 11/7/7?
So there's not an expiration on the weekend?
We just won't be able to, we got to get you everything 7 days prior, to the plan commission meeting. So all that information is going to come after you've already received that information from us. So we won't have any review in the staff report for the stuff that comes in after the 7 days. We'll just be forwarding you documentation for you to enjoy reading.
So, but also that first period, if it's 11, as we discussed, that or 10 ends up on the Sunday, is that right?
Right, 10 ends on the
Yeah, so if it's 11/7/7, you wouldn't get your final written argument unless the applicant submits a day or 2 early until 2 days before the hearing.
Right.
So you might encourage the applicant to submit earlier if that's the course you're going to follow.
Do we have to vote on this or can we just make a decision? Do we have to vote on this, Bill?
The chair.
Yeah.
Proceed. How you want to do it. If 11 is, if you're interested in, what I'd suggest is open for 11 days till On July 8th, 5 o'clock PM to submit to the city. Then 7 day for any new evidence argument. And then for 7 days until Thursday, July 15th, for rebuttal testimony.
Another 7 to the second.
That's not working out right. Is it the 8th? Is a Monday. That's right.
Right, so
So
then you have
Monday, the
15th,
15th
right.
for rebuttal, and then Monday, the 22nd for applicant's final written argument. That'll give you 4 days from when it comes in to absorb and make your decision. The applicant may well submit early, which would give you more time.
I think one of the other items in here is 68 pages of this as a guidebook.
Okay.
Interesting guidebook too, all of the pictures from Canada.
So I mean, that it's a little bit less because, I mean, obviously you can read the guidebook and as part of it, but
Yeah,
it's not it's pertinent, but it's not documentation that's forward for the application. It is, but it's guidebook.
So is that the planning commission's wishes? That
Yes.
Is the schedule?
Yes.
You're getting-
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Aaron, I got a lot of yeses out here. Are you feeling good about that?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, seems like a consensus.
consensus. So we'll do an 11-7-7. 11 days to submit new information, 7 days for the applicant to rebut any new information. And then 7 days after that for the applicant to make their final.
Be clear, the second 7 day period for anybody to submit rebuttal evidence to what comes in.
Okay.
You don't get to create new ones, but it's typically it is the applicant, but the applicant may submit new evidence that.
Got it. Okay. Great. Everybody doing all right? You ready for the next one?
Yeah, let's do it.
We're done.
Our next item is also a quasi judicial hearing, public hearing CU 2402 and 2405 CETA on behalf of the city of Cannon Beach requesting a conditional use permit and variance. CU 2402 and B 24-05 CETA on behalf of the city of Cannon Beach requesting a variance for undeveloped property and conditional use permit for the purpose of relocating the existing cache site structure to a nice site east of where the new police station is to be constructed. The undeveloped property is located east of Highway 101, tax lot 100, map 41006B in an institutional reserve. The request will be against municipal code 17.80, conditional uses, and municipal code chapter 17.84 variances. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the planning commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or a personal bias? Has any commission member had any ex parte contact?
We need to claim a site visit.
You can claim a site visit. You know, it's interesting. It's not on here. So I'm like, are we not supposed to go on site?
Didn't we have a conversation in that conflicts training that said a site visit actually doesn't constitute?
Site visit. So if the planning commission were to go as a body. on the
Right,
site
but
visit, that's not
individually,
what we
it's
need.
not.
But individually, it's fine. It's just, basically you want to say, I was there on the site so that if somebody wants to provide additional information, well, you went there on a Tuesday and actually things are different. So.
And we have the staff report.
Yes, just a moment here while I bring up. The applicant requests a variance and conditional use approval for the relocation of the emergency services cache site on tax lot 41006B000200 to tax lot 100. The city of Cannon Beach recently approved the construction of a new police station on tax lot 200. And the initial plan was to demolish the primary structure, relocate the shipping containers, and return them to their original location after construction was completed. Due to cost concerns with relocating the facility twice, an alternative plan to permanently relocate the cache has been developed. The plan is Plan is to permanently relocate the facility from its current location on tax lot 200, approximately 300 feet to the east, to a relatively flat area on tax lot 100. The proposed site is accessed by an existing service road and was clear cut prior to 2013. Vegetation removal and grading will be required prior to the placement of the cache site containers. After its acquisition in 2013, the city annexed the property into city limits. However, an urban growth boundary expansion did not take place at that time. 2 of the 3 parcels that constitute the Southwind purchase are within city limits but outside of the urban growth boundary. The parcel on which the police station is to be located is within both. The Southwind master plan was adopted regarding planned publicly beneficial uses of the subject property, and all parcels within the purchase were assigned the institutional reserve IR zoning classification. The IR zone appears to have been developed specifically for this site, as the property was commercial forest land prior to its acquisition by the city, and assignment of a comprehensive plan designation outside of a UGB is permitted under Oregon Administrative Rule 660-006-0015. As such, the portion of the property outside of the urban growth boundary is subject to the requirements of statewide planning goal 4, the purpose of which is to conserve forest lands for the purpose of commercial timber harvest. As these lands are subject to the objectives of goal 4, any development must be consistent with the uses permitted by that goal. The proposed placement of the emergency services cache site on city-owned lands outside the urban growth boundary, but within city limits, is consistent with both the Southwind master plan and a statewide planning goal 4 as detailed in this report. Moving into the applicable criteria for variances. The institutional reserve zone states that an emergency shelter on land within the urban growth boundary is a use that may be conditionally permissible. Subject property is outside of the UGB, however, it is within city limits. The master plan indicates that the subject property shall be used for public purposes. The subject property, tax lot 100, is formal commercial forest land and as such is subject to provisions of statewide planning goal 4. The arrangement where city limits extend beyond a UGB is atypical but permissible, as recorded in the Department of Land Conservation and Development Notice in Exhibit C3. There are no identified negative impacts to public health, safety, or welfare associated with the proposed relocation of the cache site. The relocation is consistent with existing and planned future uses of the property that will serve as a police station and emergency operations center. Relocation of the cache site will also reduce potential congestion around the police station and allow the facilities to operate in a more complementary manner, especially in the event of a natural disaster necessitating their use. OAR 660-006-0025 specifies the development standards for a use authorized to be placed on lands within goal 4 requirements. And these are detailed in the report. The proposed relocation will not have any impact regarding these criteria. No commercial forestry activities are taking place on the subject property, and at this time, no commercial timber harvest is planned. There would be no significant change to fire hazard or the ability of emergency responders to access the site in the event of a fire, as the proposed site is accessible by a former logging road. The Southwind Master Plan designates the public property is intended to be used for critical and essential facilities and services because the property is largely above the reach of modeled tsunami inundation areas. Emergency services cache sites meet the definition of an essential public facility. Oregon administrative rules state that lands inventoried as forest lands must be designated in the comprehensive plan and implemented with a conserved forest lands consistent with state regulations. This reflects the regulatory framework of the institutional reserve zone, which is intended to reserve areas for potential future urban uses and permits commercial forest operations, activities related to these operations, low impact recreational uses such as trails, and low levels of non-forestry development, such as emergency shelters or municipal water facilities. The Oregon Administrative Rules defines that certain uses may be permitted to standards. And these standards are detailed in the report. Continuing on, the circumstances leading to this variance request are not the result of a land use violation or other type of self-induced hardship. Moving into conditional uses, tax lot 200 hosts the current emergency services cache site and will be improved with the new Cannon Beach Police Station and Emergency Operations Center. Having a cache site placed with the EOC is consistent with that purpose, and this location provides a tsunami evacuation area for persons in the south end of town. The proposed relocation is anticipated to have a positive impact on traffic flow at the police station EOC site, as it will reduce opportunities for congestion by separating the uses. The site plan shown on the screen, the site plan included in the report is excerpted from Design Review Board File 24-10 and shows the original plan layout with the cache site in its current location. The proposed reconfiguration shown on the screen will provide a greater amount of space for parking, loading, and unloading at the cache site. As currently configured, there are opportunities for congestion at the cache site's prefabricated containers will open into the roadway and parking areas serving the police station EOC. The relocated site will provide an approximately 100-foot setback between the containers and the service road, resulting in a large parking and loading/unloading area. There are no significant slopes at the proposed relocation site, and the structures will consist primarily of prefabricated shipping containers that will be set on the ground in a manner similar to the current cache site. Vegetation clearing and grading will be necessary prior to placement. And there are no identified conflicts with this criteria. Moving into criteria for public facilities and services. The proposed relocation is consistent with the goals and objectives of the Southwind Master Plan and the planned police station EOC development, as it provides a necessary public service that enables the city to be better prepared for a natural disaster. There will be no negative impacts to residential neighborhoods, as the Southwind property is not developed for that purpose, and no residential development is anticipated at present. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. Have there been any additional correspondence that's come in since 2 o'clock this afternoon?
No, there is not.
Thank you. We'll move to public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered are noted in staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets on the meeting page of the city website. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code which the person testifying believes that follow the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Leslie Jones. I'm here, I work with CETA Architects and Engineers and am a project architect for them. I'm here for the city. And I will keep my comments fairly brief, and thank you to staff for their.
Sorry to interrupt you. I always hate doing.
Address?
Yes, please.
So I'm never sure if that should be my personal address or the address of the city as I represent.
So it's the address that you would want to receive notice. So if the notice is going to come to you at your work address or at the city's address, it's where you want to receive notice so that we have the.
Then I'll give you my work address, which is 15789 South 72nd Street in Portland.
Sorry to interrupt your train of thought there.
I'm sorry. So starting with history here, the site, as was mentioned, as was originally conceived for the police station, including minimizing impact to the cache. supplies and equipment. And so the initial intent was to retain them in place, develop the adjacent to that location. As we developed the plan and specifically as we developed site grading for that plan, it became apparent that it would impact the current Connex box location. They would need to be relocated for construction. In collaboration with the city, reviewed several options how to mitigate that, including moving those Connex boxes temporarily and then moving them back. We reviewed locations for that. We reviewed various grading scenarios to limit that impact on balance and consideration of accessibility for the site overall. It was determined to move those boxes. By moving them off-site, that was the scenario that seemed to offer the most advantages. So some of those advantages include increased resiliency. We think this is an investment in the future for emergency management services by expanding the available area for those services. It will also allow space for growth on the police station site, whether that be used for police services or for emergency cash supplies. And as was mentioned, will lessen congestion in the case of an emergency. So there will be area to maneuver around the new proposed cache location, as well as additional maneuvering area on the police station site. I will note again that this area was logged not too many years ago, 2013, I believe, was when it was cleared and then replanted in 2014. It was included in part of the 2013 Horning Geoscience report when that whole Southwind property was evaluated. As part of that report, it was deemed an appropriate location for development in terms of land stability. We also confirmed there was equipment placed at the access point up the hill there to test the stability of the ground there. We went back and had that read this past year, and there had been no movement on the ground. We did also have a geotechnical report done by Don Roundup at the police station site to understand those soils, and that was done in October of last year. As was mentioned, this is city-owned property and it is within the city limits. The request for variance is based on the language of the conditional use that says for properties inside the urban growth boundary. So that is the reason for the variance request. And then the conditional use is because the use of it as an emergency center is conditional in that institutional reserve zone.
Could you repeat that, please, what you just said about the reason for the variance and the condition?
For the variance is the conditional use and that the property as an shelter, I believe is the term. That is allowed as a conditional use on properties within the urban boundary. And as we are not within the urban growth boundary, it requires a variance of that specific language.
Were you finished with your presentation?
Yes, and I'm here for questions as well.
Sure. Are there questions?
I have a couple, but if you'd like to have.
On a roll.
The cost savings, have you quantified that?
Yes, we have budgeted that, and that was part of our reasoning here is because it will allow us to move those boxes one time. And so instead of investing in relocating those Connex boxes once and then moving them back at the end, we are investing in a more permanent solution and only moving the boxes once. We do have an overall budget worked up to do this. I don't have that number in front of me, but it does also include extending electrical conduit up the hill to the new proposed site. So there will be electricity.
The reason I ask is the cost savings were the justification, part of the justification, or there are additional good ones, but the cost savings was the original one. And I just wondered if that number had been quantified, the savings there. By not moving it and moving it back, how much money were you intending to save by doing that?
I can follow up with that information. I know that's been analyzed by Emmerich Construction. They are our general contractor for the project and have those numbers available.
And while you do it, I would like to understand what your plan is for the trees. Ordinarily, somebody coming in doing grading and vegetation clearing would give us a tree plan on just exactly how many trees are on the property and how those are intended to be addressed.
What I do know is that the trees that were replanted in 2014, they were spruce and hemlock. That area, the reason that the boxes you saw on that site are set back from that access road as much as they were impacting the trees is so that we can grade up the hill there and provide a flat area for the boxes. On the police site, I would say we've done a tree analysis for trees being removed for grading and are replacing on a more than one-to-one basis. For this area of the relocated cache, that would remain here for the cache maneuverability and grading that slope.
And yet there is a cost, at least to the community of those trees going. And I'm not saying they should stand in the way of the project, but I would like an informed cost analysis that tells us exactly how much is saved by not having to do the same thing twice. And then I'd like an estimate from the city on just exactly, what we lose in terms of the number of trees that we're going to have to remove to do that. And I might take that a bit farther. I would add that if we're going to treat this property as a forest reserve under rules that are applicable to the forest, then I would say we should probably think about replacing those trees somewhere on that property. Not necessarily where you're going to build a cache, but it's a big property, and ordinarily, again, we might ask an applicant to do that.
So this is a question. We are replacing, as I mentioned, trees on the police site at a higher than one-to-one ratio. So there's a surplus of replacing an area of that site. So would that contribute?
It might, yeah, go ahead and throw it in. I would like to see it all. That's all I have.
Les, did you have a question or question?
I just wanted a clarification, Leslie, the geologic report that was presented on behalf of the police station, did it actually cover this area or?
It did not extend
Right.
up to the extent that helped.
Thank you.
I had two questions. One was already covered by Mike about the number of trees that would need to be removed in this and whether or not that was going to get covered under replacement. And then the other question I had was kind of related as well. The road going up is not wide enough for two-way traffic going up and around, and it's not clearly visible as you go up that road. Is there a plan for widening that so that for safety of people going in and out of the cache site, that's you were talking about that there's an area for turnarounds and stuff like that. And if widening it is in the plans, there's trees that are relatively close to the side of that. Is there going to be trees that as well?
Not as far as I'm currently aware. The widening is challenging because of the grades in there. So my current understanding is that road would not be modified.
Okay.
Any other question? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there other presentations by the applicant? Are there presentations by proponents? One online? Are there presentations by opponents? Okay. Would the applicant like to say anything more? I feel like you're just up there, but I have to ask. No, okay. With that in mind, we will close the public comment section and move to consideration. Mike?
Insufficient data. I'd like to see a little bit more. I think it's a good plan. I can't talk to you anymore, but I think it's a good plan. I would just like to see how the costs savings versus the cost of the project play out, including trees. Because going forward, we're gonna be asking people to replace trees on a one-for-one basis, and on that property itself, if it is treated as an institutional reserve for purposes of forest-related activities, we should treat that property the way any forest property would be treated, and there would be replacement. Now, whether the replacement itself, connection with the police station is sufficient, I would like to know.
The geology.
Always a little bit concerning, but it's concerning where it is. So I don't know that we really change the risk. That, Steve,
Did you have?
Well, you know, as I recall, the geology for the police station, that report was very favorable for that particular location. And that's why I was hoping that it happened to include location just east of there. But I think we did hear that there was a in-ground monitor that had been left in place and that had been reviewed, and there's been no swell movement, you know, at this new location. So in my mind, that isn't a big concern. That's the data I would kind of want to know, that there wasn't a geohazard in that location.
Okay, other comments? Anything?
No, financial cost and stuff like that, that's not one of our criteria, correct?
no,
Whether or not the applicant's process is more expensive to do it one way or more expensive to do it another way. I mean, regardless of who this particular applicant is, an applicant.
well, they're asking for a variance.
Yeah.
And they're using the cost savings as a justification. So I think at the very least, we should know. And again, I'm not gonna disagree or agree or disagree with the cost itself, but I think when you factor in some of the other costs, like removing trees that aren't gonna be replaced, maybe that cost differential doesn't look as favorable for moving to this site. That said, I'm fully in favor of it, just replace the trees.
Yeah, no, and I was thinking of it more, I'm going all the way down.
What is going on?
All sorts of issues. The financial cost versus the social cost of the trees, losing the trees in an area we're intending on protecting.
Mhm.
And I see the social cost to the community. This is intended to be preserved under statewide goal number 4, about preserved for either farming the trees or for ecological reasons. And we're choosing in this case that this is being preserved for ecological reasons. And so, you know, cutting down trees and basically building a parking lot in front of the Connex boxes. Trees, meeting statewide goal number 4.
For comments of other?
Insufficient data though.
You feel the same way?
I feel the same way.
And on the trees?
Yeah, very, very much on the trees, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention the South Winds plan a little bit. I mean, yes, it's institutional and forest reserve, but all of the plans that were done by previous plan commission council that were adopted were for emergency type services, school, fire station, police station, emergency facilities, food bank, et cetera. So it was reserved until those uses were going to potentially be there. We're at that point in time where we're starting to use the property for the intended purposes that were purchased. So it was to reserve the forest until the city needed to use the property for purposes of these emergency services. So I just want everyone to have that in the back of their mind. This was not just simply to maintain it as a forest reserve, but for these emergency services type uses. And that was plans adopted by the city.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
And so this lot is outside of urban growth, inside city limits, correct?
Correct.
And so that's why statewide goal number 4 applies here.
Yeah, but emergency services are part of the institutional forest reserve, correct, Robert? That is one of the uses that is allowed regardless of if it was forest, reserve or not. So, even if, for example, we were to keep it for that purpose, the emergency service aspect of it is allowed in as part of that.
Correct. And statewide goal 4 does allow for some limited developments such as emergency services sites. As those are not considered by the state to be inconsistent with the forest management practices that are mandated by goal 4.
Seems like Mike's concern, Eric's as well here, as it was to, can kind of be summed up on consistency. We have the police station site and we have a plan for trees that are being replaced there. We have this reserve site and we don't have a plan, a specific plan. So if we had that, I feel like what I'm hearing is people be more comfortable with this, generally comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Just being consistent.
Yeah.
Would be helpful.
Now, one thing that may be useful to follow up on that is that at the time of acquisition in 2013, the site had been clear cut. So there may not be any significant trees in this exact footprint, i.e. anything with a 6-inch or greater diameter at the 4-foot DVH.
That'd be perfect. For the case.
That may very well be the case. These may be very small juvenile trees. And not necessarily any significant growth because this had been clear cut.
Yeah, well, enough time has passed that it could be 6-inch or greater diameter from 2013.
Yeah.
But we don't know that.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. We don't know. So, just the tree plan, it doesn't have to be, have to be really detailed, but we should know what we're cutting.
Yeah, I would say there's a significant number of small alders that are on this site that are gonna be cut.
Okay.
No question about it. It's the only way that it gets done. I mean, I'm not trying to, it's just, there's gonna be a number that get cut as part of the plan, so.
And I think I'm hearing people say that they're okay with that as long as there's an understanding of what it is and that it will be recovered in.
I was just indicating that there is a lot.
Yeah. And I'm not sure that I'm not kind of interested in Eric's question about the road. Just thinking about it, it may be that that's infeasible to widen that road, and I can accept that, but none of the other cache sites have got that kind of limited access. They've got wider, roads where people can get in and out, and I'm just.
Yeah, I wasn't advocating for widening the road. I was just pointing that out, that I've been up that road before and it's not wide enough for two-way traffic, and the curve that it makes it so you can't see that parking lot from the bottom port where this new parking lot was proposed to be at.
Do you think that'd be safe for a public facility even to have that situation? Or there's gonna be two-way traffic and the road's not wide enough and the curves are.
But in an emergency, you're probably not gonna have vehicle traffic.
I imagine the only time would be during
Okay, exactly.
For
Which is
doing it,
minimal,
but
it's minimal time.
but in those timeframes, you have that issue, a safety issue, but I wasn't advocating for making it wider because I feel like making it wider will
destroy more trees.
It will
It'll
definitely
disturb
destroy
more
more
trees
trees,
and-
larger trees.
Yeah. But that was just when I was looking at the map and looking at all of that stuff and remembering from when I've been out there, what I was thinking.
Have you been out there since they improved that road?
I don't know. It's been a little, about a year maybe. We did a training on the fire department out there and I don't.
Yeah.
I remember.
I can't speak to it. I do know that the road was improved by Public Works, but I can't tell you that it was widened.
Okay, yeah, I don't remember exactly when it was. I just remember the fire engine literally sat edge to edge on it. So I was like, all right, well, it's a back out.
Yeah, I don't think it's very wide. I think it was just to get it wide enough to try to lessen the impact of removing and other trees and different things like that, but still allowed function for Public Works to get up to their spoils area and things like that. Right.
Okay.
So if we generally like the idea of this being moved, trees. Any suggestions how we?
Is there a reason, what are the timelines we're dealing with?
Um, you know, just like everyone else, we'd like to move sooner than later, but at the same time, you know, it seems to me like, I guess the plan commission, if you're looking for this information, might be to continue it to provide the information that you're requesting.
Okay. So, yeah, just a continuation.
Feeling good about that, okay.
Go ahead.
An alternative would be a condition that they come, approval with the condition they come back with the tree report, that this, as I'm thinking through some of the things I've heard, that may be an option, but it's really the commission's call.
How would that work, Bill, if we said condition upon bringing back a tree report? What if the tree report showed details that perhaps we disagreed with?
And that wouldn't be an appropriate condition, that the tree report is likely to be inadequate, or there's a possibility that it'd be inadequate in some ways.
Or what if it suggests another set of issues?
Then that would be inadequate in some.
Okay. All right. I'm okay with that.
I like Bill's suggestion.
I didn't quite hear you cut out just a little. Do or do not like the suggestion?
I like Bill's suggestion of approving with conditions. I'd like to move this along. I think if we're all in agreement with it, let's approve it with conditions.
Okay.
So it might help to identify what you want in that report. It sounds like the number of trees being removed from the catch site, the total number of replantings, anything else that,
An indication how this meshes with the police station and the trees you're already planting. I mean, you could be, you're replacing most of them already, but and going more than one to one. So, I just like to see that. I don't recall the tree plan on the police station.
I don't think we were presented with that. I think that was presented with the DRB application.
Okay.
Yeah, because our decision didn't have to do with trees.
I'm sorry?
Is there a tree plan already?
For the police station, I believe that one was submitted. I think
For the PD site
detailed,
itself,
right?
not this.
Yeah, I think fairly detailed.
Okay. I can just.
We can always-
DRB, yeah.
Yeah.
right? Does it, do you?
Yeah, my understanding is tree plan, number of trees that are being removed, number of trees that are to be replaced. And I believe there was some discussion that wanted some quantifiable information in terms of cost savings, was my understanding.
Well, I don't know that we had agreement on cost savings. I think we had a discussion on that.
All right.
So do we want to pick up that conversation?
I'm just not seeing it as a criteria, so I'm not understanding why we would hold up a decision for that purpose.
It was to make a point. We can forgive that. I'm okay, but the criteria would be. That's the justification we got for the move. So, but no
We
data.
also heard about separation of sites so that you could have concurrent activity without all being.
We heard that too.
That to me sounded like the more relevant criteria.
Perhaps. And again, if the commission does not feel that they need the data on the cost, I'm okay with that.
All right, well, seems like keeping it to the trees is.
What is there more discussion need to be had on the geologic report portion for this? So were you comfortable with?
Oh, yeah, I am comfortable with it and in fact, remember, it's not permanent structures that are up there, they're Connex boxes. No, I'm.
That's a really important distinction.
Particularly concerned about it.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Okay, so we need a motion for this, right?
Yes. That we approve with the condition that the city provide a tree report with the named components that we have already discussed.
A second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Tessa, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Moritz,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
Yes.
Commissioner Ostrander,
Yes.
Commissioner Bates.
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Yes. Motion is. Okay. Moving on. We should need to go discuss how we take minutes in our meetings.
All the same.
That's good to tell.
Is that correct?
There we go.
Got enough?
Thanks.
Mhm.
Great.
Yeah. Figure out online.
I think.
Can you, give a quick summary of what we're looking at here?
Yeah, I'll let Bill go and see.
Bill, you wanted to?
Yeah, you're kind of curious why you get a minute from a 1987 meetings of the Miss Pratt Commission.
Right.
This is actually an attachment to the Oregon Attorney General's Public Records Manual as an example of what they give as what meetings should, meeting minutes. should. This is, when the Oregon AG's Public Records Manual is sort of seen as the gold standard of how public records and meetings process works. And so, given the discussion that happened at the last one, I thought it might be interesting to see what the AG manual says. Here's our example of what minutes should look like. And, you can see it's significantly different than what, your current planning commission looks like. There's nothing wrong with having longer ones. This is probably, you could shorten it some, not too much, but it's just, given the discussion I heard, here's what AG said meeting minutes should look like.
Can you also comment a little bit about the video and how that relates to the minutes?
Yeah, so I did not go back and look at the video of the meeting that you had where the discussion came up. But when I was talking to Steve about it, what the state requires is either minutes of meetings be kept or that a recording of the meeting be kept. And so, a number of communities have just dispensed with minutes entirely and relied on recording. And so, the city keeps recordings of all the meetings, so minutes aren't actually required. So, the question is, what purpose are the minutes serving for you? I think, what I heard from Steve, it's good to have something in writing for people who maybe aren't technically savvy or, but it's more a summary rather than a transcript is what may be appropriate. Because if somebody really wants to dive into it, they can get into the recordings.
Yeah. And we're not saying, hey, we want to just eliminate minutes. There's a lot of almost transcription as part of the minutes. And I'm not trying to say we're trying to eliminate that, but it takes up a significant amount of staff time. I think what our idea was, and this is what we're looking for feedback from the Plan Commission, is, a lot of times it's getting the people who are here, the motions, the conditions, and then those that would be in the audience, maybe the more important aspects of what they're saying instead of everything. So we would be looking to try to reduce the size of the minutes that you presently see, yet providing them with the goal of attendance, who's here, who made the motions during the discussion, what are the kind of relative points compared to just a lot of the detail that we presently have. So I'm not saying we don't have an issue one way or the other in terms of how Plan Commission or any of the other committees for that matter want to do it. But I know we had some discussion, and based on that discussion, we just thought we'd mention this to the Plan Commission to get feedback.
Yeah. I think I initially thought, one, there would be a lot of time for it, but at the start of every one of our meetings, we go, does anybody have any comment? And I don't remember anybody having any comment. I'll start with me. I'm not the best at going, this is exactly what was said. So now we potentially have two sets of meeting documentation. One is what's written, one is what's online. And is there a chance that it's not the same? Yeah, I think there is. So it would save us time. It would also save my conscience from going, I need to look at this more carefully. And I think it's a waste of our time to try to really mirror that when we have the technology, and it takes, you know, someone who's gonna be able to find this stuff online, which is frankly how people are looking for it most of the time, is just the same amount of technological experience. So I would say, I like this report. It's real simple. I was thinking about it tonight, like, you know, if we just got a list of who was the proponent, who was an opponent, who was the applicant, their address, spoke in favor of, spoke against, and left it at that. That'd be very simple for us to get through. It'd be very simple for you and your team to get through as well. And I just don't, in the world we live in today, I don't see the need for everything we have.
And we certainly can, you know, start with a certain amount and then bring that to the plan commission, and you guys can, as we're doing it, let us know, hey, we don't think that's enough, or yeah, that's plenty. You know, I mean, it can be a little bit of trial and error as we do it to get to the point in time that everyone has a comfort level with the minutes that are being provided.
I like it. I don't know, it'll be an in-depth conversation based on our past.
Would
but-
there be any benefit to notating major items with the point in the video? So I don't know, do you use the video when you're going back to do transcription? So would it be fairly easy to just mark hour 15 beginning this item, hour 20 beginning this, so that if someone were looking at the written minutes, they could cross-reference the more in-depth conversation?
I could do that.
I'm just wondering if that helps.
Really like that.
Good idea.
That's, I use the minutes for this
Right,
meeting
because
and
you
other
can scroll
meetings.
through the.
I'll scroll through, I'll find if a group talked about a thing and then be like, okay, well, that looks like it's about halfway through the minutes. So then I'll jump in the video to watch about halfway and see if I can catch where that's at. But I really like what you were saying, that majorly summarize. And then I really like having minutes because they're searchable. It's really easy to search them,
Yeah.
especially with technology now. You can search them, but then being able to get to the actual information that's being spoken on the.
Great idea. Great idea. Okay.
All right, well, why don't we just keep taking a swing at it, and you guys can just give us some feedback and let us know, hey, you can go a little less, we'd like a little bit more, and we'll just go from there.
Sounds good. I like it. Anything else on that? All right, moving on, tree report. Biden.
We have abundance of activity in the month of May. We have one hazardous tree. And there was no requirement to replant per the arborist report. Because of certain conditions involving the tree, it was a non-native cherry tree. There were some disease aspects to this, so it was potentially not a suitable location for replanting. There were limited opportunities on the lot. I believe there are other trees present on the subject property as well.
Okay, any questions? No. Okay. All right, thank you. Anything for the good of the order? All right, I think we did pretty well, given all we had in front of us.
Yeah.
We'll adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about the chair.